The sound came first. Not a scream, not a laugh, but a cry that refused to end. It echoed through marble halls and glass walls, through the mansion of a man who had everything money could buy, except peace. When billionaire Edward Hawthorne burst into the nursery, he saw the twins wailing again, two small boys trembling beneath the weight of a grief too heavy for their 5-year-old hearts. Another nanny stood frozen, tears streaking her face, her suitcase already packed by the door. "Sir, I'm sorry," she whispered. "I can't do this anymore." Edward didn't answer. He just looked at the clock. 4:27 a.m. For the 6th time this month, the night had broken before dawn. If you believe dignity should never be optional, tap like to help this message travel. Because what happened next would tear a family apart, and then stitch it back together in ways no one expected. The Hawthorne estate sat on the edge of a quiet lake, where fog kissed the water every morning like a promise never kept. Inside, silence was supposed to mean order, but tonight, silence was losing. Edward Hawthorne, 37, had built an empire in software. Precision, efficiency, data. Every problem had a solution, until grief entered his house and refused to leave. His wife Lillian had been gone for 6 months. A car crash, a phone call he would never forget. And since that night, the world had felt uneven. The twins, Noah and Eli, hadn't slept through a single night. They screamed when lights turned off. They kicked at anyone who tried to hold them. Edward hired psychologists, therapists, even a sleep whisperer from London. Nothing worked. Tonight was no different. The nanny, her hands shaking, tried to rock Eli in her arms, but the boy's cries only grew louder. Edward stepped in, voice low but firm. "Enough," he said. "You're overtired. You're feeding the chaos." The woman turned, eyes wet. "They're not chaos, Mr. Hawthorne. They're grieving." Then she was gone. Edward stared at the door after it closed. Grieving. He hated that word. It sounded too soft, too slow, like something he couldn't fix. And Edward Hawthorne fixed things. He pulled out his phone and opened the staff app. The headline blinked coldly against the dark screen. "Nanny position open, double rate, immediate start. No time off, first 3 weeks." Across the city, in a small basement apartment that smelled faintly of lavender oil and boiled rice, Maya Williams was still awake. The ad glowed on her cracked tablet screen. She didn't recognize the name Hawthorne, but the photo stopped her. 2 boys, pale and tired, with eyes that looked older than they should. Maya was 32. A professional caregiver, she'd worked with children no one else could reach. Foster kids, trauma wards, homes where love had become a rumor. She whispered to herself, reading the description. Energetic twins, recently bereaved, require patient, experienced caregiver. Her heartbeat slowed. She knew what that meant. Loss wrapped in small bodies, trying to find where safety went. Maya reached for her small notebook. On the first page were her own rules, written years ago after leaving foster care. Number 1, never lie to children about pain. Number 2, never promise to stay. Prove it. Number 3, never let silence win. She closed the notebook. "All right," she whispered. "Let's see if I can help them." The next morning, the mansion's gates opened as a silver sedan pulled up. Maya stepped out, her hands steady despite the ache in her stomach. The housekeeper, Caroline Mercer, met her at the door. "You must be Miss Williams," she said, studying the woman's calm eyes and worn shoes. "You sure you want this job? 17 didn't last a day." Maya smiled softly. "Maybe the 18th will." Inside, chaos waited. The twins were in the living room, or what was left of it. Feathers from torn pillows floated in the air like snow. One child was standing on the sofa yelling, "You can't make us like you!" The other clutched a photo frame so tightly his knuckles turned white. Maya didn't shout. She didn't rush. She lowered herself to the floor until she was at their level. "I won't try to make you like me," she said gently. Both boys froze. "I'm not here to replace your mama," she continued. "I'm here because I think you might be tired of hurting alone." The smaller twin, Eli, blinked through his tears. "You don't know her." "No," Maya said. "But I know what it feels like when your world falls apart." A toy truck rolled off the table and landed near her knee. For a second, the room held its breath. Then Noah whispered, "We hate everyone who leaves." Maya nodded. "Then I'll have to stay long enough to make you wonder if that's true." From the hallway, Edward watched through the camera feed on his tablet. No scolding, no panic. Just a woman sitting on the floor, speaking in a tone that sounded like patience. He frowned, sentimental. By evening, the boys had calmed enough to eat half their dinner. Caroline whispered to Maya, "That's more than they've eaten in weeks." When night came, Maya refused the guest room. "They sleep only if they feel someone near," she said. She laid a blanket between their small beds, resting a hand lightly on each child's back. Her voice floated through the dark, an old lullaby her mother used to hum when the power went out. "Rest your heart. It knows the way. The sun is waiting on another day." The boys' breathing slowed, then silence, soft, deep, healing. For the first time in months, the Hawthorne house slept. At dawn, Edward opened the nursery door quietly. Maya was asleep on the floor, the twins curled toward her, their hands tangled in her sweater. He stopped, uncertain, the morning light catching the softness on their faces. For a fleeting moment, gratitude tried to reach him. Then his eyes caught the faint glow of the camera above the crib, blinking red. His jaw tightened. Without a word, he turned and walked away. Tomorrow, misunderstanding would strike like lightning, and everything would shatter again. Morning sunlight slid across the marble floors like a slow-moving tide. The Hawthorne mansion looked perfect again, at least from a distance. Every vase in its place, every rug aligned, every mirror spotless. But beneath that precision lay exhaustion, the kind that hides behind polite greetings and endless lists. Edward Hawthorne stood in his study, reviewing reports he wasn't really reading. The pages blurred, the words dissolving into fragments of guilt. He hadn't slept. Not since that strange woman had arrived yesterday. Not since his sons had finally closed their eyes and dreamed without crying. He should have felt relief. Instead, he felt something he couldn't quite name. Discomfort. Maybe even fear. Because peace in his house didn't feel normal anymore. From the doorway, his assistant Caroline Mercer cleared her throat. "She's here, sir. The new nanny, Maya Williams." Edward's eyes flicked up. "She stayed the night?" "Yes," Caroline said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. And so did the twins sleep. Maya stepped into the study, her posture straight, her expression calm but alert. Her hair was tied back neatly, her clothes simple, a gray sweater, dark jeans, and worn brown shoes that had seen too many shifts in too many homes. Edward studied her the way he studied contracts, carefully searching for flaws. "You arrived yesterday afternoon," he said flatly. "You stayed without permission." Maya didn't flinch. "I stayed because they needed someone there." I assumed you'd prefer quiet children to screaming ones. Caroline hid a small grin behind her clipboard. Edward's jaw tightened. This isn't a charity, Miss Williams. I run my household like I run my company, with structure. Maya nodded slowly. And structure needs rest, Mr. Hawthorne. Children can't follow rules they're too tired to understand. Her voice was soft, but the words carried a steady confidence that filled the room. Edward blinked, momentarily thrown off. He wasn't used to employees speaking this way. Calm, direct, unafraid, he gestured toward a chair. Sit. She did. He folded his arms. Tell me why you took this job. You saw the ad. You know the history. Maya met his gaze without hesitation. I've worked with families who lost everything. I know what it looks like when love leaves a house and grief starts running it instead. Edward frowned. You're saying that's what's happening here? I'm saying your sons are trying to protect what's left of their world, and sometimes that looks like chaos. He leaned back, studying her again. You think you can fix that? Maya shook her head. I'm not here to fix them. I'm here to help them remember they're safe. The words landed in the air like a small truth too heavy to ignore. Later that morning, she walked through the house alone, mapping its sounds, the hum of the refrigerator, the echo of her, footsteps on the tile, the whisper of the lake outside the windows. Every home had a rhythm, she thought. This one sounded like someone holding their breath. The twins were in the playroom, building a tower out of blocks. Eli noticed her first. You came back. Maya smiled. I said I would. Noah frowned. People always say that. I know, Maya said gently. That's why I don't say it twice unless I mean it. She sat cross-legged on the floor beside them. The boys stared for a moment, unsure what to do with someone who wasn't giving orders. Then Eli pushed a red block toward her. You can build if you want. Thank you, she said. I'll start with the base. Strong foundations help tall things stay up. Noah looked at her suspiciously. You talk like our teacher. That's good, Maya replied, her voice playful. Teachers and builders have the same job. They make sure things don't fall apart. For the first time, a small smile flickered across his face. From the hallway, Caroline whispered to Edward, She's not like the others. He didn't answer, but he stayed to watch. He saw his sons sitting still, no yelling, no crying, just quiet building. The tower wobbled, and both boys gasped as it tilted. Before it could fall, Maya placed her hand gently over theirs and whispered, Let it lean. Sometimes leaning keeps it standing. Caroline blinked. Did you hear that? Edward nodded slowly. Yes. He didn't understand why that simple sentence tightened his throat. At lunch, Maya joined the staff in the kitchen instead of eating alone. She listened more than she spoke. Stories about the house before the accident, how Lillian used to cook pancakes every Sunday and dance with the boys in their pajamas. When Caroline finished a story, Maya asked softly, Did they ever talk about her after? Caroline shook her head. Not once. That night, Maya placed 2 framed photos on the twins' nightstand, one of the boys and one of their mother. They can look at her again when they're ready, she said quietly. Edward passed by the nursery door around midnight. The lights were dim, the room calm. He paused when he heard it, Maya's voice, low and warm, reading from a storybook. The tree grew roots so deep that even storms couldn't move it. It didn't grow fast. It grew steady, and that was enough. Eli's small voice interrupted, drowsy. Is that tree real? Maya smiled. It is, if you believe in growing even when you're scared. Silence. then the faint sigh of a child drifting into sleep. Edward turned away, something shifting quietly in his chest. He didn't know why it mattered that her voice didn't sound rehearsed, or why the word steady echoed long after he reached his room. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the phone beside him, at the ad he had posted, still live, still waiting for responses. He deleted it. The next morning, the twins ran down the hall laughing. Actual laughter, rough around the edges, but real. Caroline almost dropped her tray when she heard it. "Good heavens, is that?" Edward nodded. "Yes, that's them." He looked out the window toward the lake, the water finally still after months of restless wind. For the first time, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, the house wasn't cursed, only lonely. And downstairs, Maya was teaching the twins how to make toast. Eli burned the first slice and frowned. "It's ruined," Maya smiled. "No, sweetheart. It's just learning." The smell of slightly burnt bread drifted through the house, and for the first time, it smelled alive. Evening unfolded slowly over the Hawthorne estate, turning the lake into a sheet of liquid gold. Inside, for the first time in months, the house didn't sound like a battlefield. The twins had spent the afternoon building towers, chasing bubbles, and even napping for 40 whole minutes. Caroline Mercer, the housekeeper, moved through the kitchen with quiet disbelief. "I don't know what she's doing," she whispered to the chef. "But whatever it is, it's working." At the kitchen table, Maya Williams was helping Eli and Noah spread peanut butter on crackers. Both boys were messy, focused, and giggling in the kind of rhythm that only children know. When Eli dropped his cracker, he gasped. It broke. Maya picked up the pieces and smiled. "Then we'll make 2 smaller ones. Sometimes broken things just become new shapes." The twins grinned. For the first time, their laughter didn't sound guilty, just free. From upstairs, Edward Hawthorne watched through the window. He was a man who used to measure success in numbers. Stock prices, square footage, time saved. But now he found himself measuring it in quieter ways. The minutes between cries, the number of laughs before bedtime. Still, something in him resisted. The house felt unfamiliar when it was peaceful, as if calm meant losing control. He'd built his empire on certainty, and Maya Williams seemed to speak a language he didn't understand. Something softer, slower, and frighteningly human. Caroline entered his office carrying a fresh set of schedules. "Sir," Miss Williams asked to adjust the boys' bedtime. "Adjust?" he repeated. "She says they need a story before sleep, a quiet routine." Edward frowned. "I don't like changing the plan." "With respect, sir," Caroline said, "the plan hasn't been working." Edward glanced at the glass walls of his office where reflections shimmered, a man surrounded by everything except connection. He sighed. "Fine. One night. Then we'll see." At 7 sharp, Maya led the twins upstairs. Each child carried a stuffed animal, a bear with one ear missing, and a small gray elephant that had clearly been hugged to exhaustion. "Do they have names?" Maya asked. Eli lifted the bear. "This one's Captain Sleep." "And yours?" she asked Noah. Noah hesitated. "Mom used to call him Buttons." Maya smiled softly. "Then Buttons it is." They climbed into bed, the kind of quiet that only comes when children finally trust they are safe. Maya sat between them on the floor, back resting against the nightstand. She pulled out a book, the one she'd found tucked behind the dresser that afternoon. The cover was faded, but on the inside, in neat handwriting, someone had written, "To my boys, love, Mommy." Maya hesitated for a heartbeat, then began to read. Once there was a garden that forgot how to bloom. The flowers were tired and the sun felt too far away. But one day, a small bird landed there and began to sing. The song wasn't loud, but it was steady. And slowly, the flowers lifted their heads. Eli's eyes began to droop. Noah rolled onto his side, clutching buttons close. When Maya closed the book, both boys were asleep. She didn't leave. She sat watching them breathe, two small chests rising and falling in rhythm. For a long time, she just listened to the sound. It wasn't perfect, but it was peace. In the hallway, Caroline stood beside Edward, her voice barely a whisper. "Look at them." He leaned closer to the half-open door. What he saw was so ordinary it felt miraculous. His sons asleep, the air calm, the shadows gentle. Maya sat quietly between the beds, her hand resting lightly on the floor, her head bowed as if in prayer. Edward's throat tightened. He wasn't used to stillness. For a second, gratitude pressed at the edges of his control. "Should I thank her?" he murmured. Caroline smiled. Sometimes silence says it better. But when Edward turned away, something else caught his eye, the faint red light from the corner of the ceiling. The camera. He'd installed it months ago to protect the boys, to make sure every nanny did their job. Now it blinked steadily, recording everything. He frowned. Why is she on the floor? Why not the chair? Why between them? The logical part of his mind whispered reassurance. They're asleep. It's fine. But the part of him trained to suspect weakness, the businessman, the widower, couldn't stop watching. Later that night, Edward sat alone in his office with a glass of untouched whiskey. The surveillance feed glowed from the screen. The nursery bathed in warm nightlight. The steady image of Maya still on the floor, motionless except for the slow rhythm of breathing. The twins didn't stir once. He remembered the counselor's words after Lillian's funeral. Children need presence, not perfection. Back then, he'd dismissed it as sentiment, but now he was watching presence unfold in real time, simple, quiet, unpolished, and it unsettled him more than any corporate loss ever had. He shut the laptop but couldn't shake the image. A stranger's patience succeeding where his wealth had failed. It was both humbling and unbearable. At dawn, light filtered through the nursery curtains. Maya woke to the sound of birds outside. Her back ached, her legs were numb, but her heart felt strangely full. She looked at the twins, their faces soft, peaceful. Caroline peeked in. "You've done the impossible," she whispered. Maya smiled. "Not impossible, just a little staying." Downstairs, Edward entered the kitchen. He looked different, less polished, more uncertain. Caroline poured him coffee and said, "They slept all night." "I saw," he replied quietly. "The first full night since—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Caroline placed a hand on his arm. "You could thank her, sir." Edward nodded but said nothing. Gratitude still felt like an unfamiliar language. That evening, Maya prepared the twins' dinner. Mashed potatoes shaped like stars, small grilled chicken pieces, and peas arranged into a smiley face. When Edward walked past, he paused. "You made that?" "Yes," Maya said. "They eat better when the food smiles first." He almost smiled himself, then caught it, embarrassed by the feeling. "Creative," he muttered, before retreating back upstairs. Maya watched him go. She could feel the fortress around him, built not from pride, but from pain. She whispered softly, "Even walls learn to listen, given time." That night, when the house finally fell silent again, she wrote in her notebook before sleeping. 2 boys slept. A man watched. Grief is loud, but peace whispers louder. She closed the book, tucked it under her pillow, and turned off the lamp. But down the hall, in the master bedroom, Edward lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the sound of that lullaby he wasn't supposed to hear. He couldn't decide whether it haunted or healed him. He only knew that tomorrow he'd have to speak, and that would change everything. Morning arrived quietly. The lake outside the Hawthorne mansion shimmered with early light, calm and perfect, like nothing tragic had ever touched it. Inside, though, the air felt heavier, as if peace itself was being held under suspicion. Edward Hawthorne sat at his breakfast table, reading an email he wasn't really seeing. His coffee had gone cold hours ago. Across from him, the security tablet flickered to life. The nightly footage from the nursery had uploaded automatically, a routine his mind said he didn't need anymore, but his guilt insisted on checking. He tapped play. At first, there was nothing unusual, the twins sleeping soundly. Maya sitting between their beds, her head bowed, her breathing slow. He almost smiled. Then, around 3 a.m., she shifted. One of the boys stirred, crying softly, and she reached out instinctively, gathering him close until he calmed. The child rested his head on her shoulder, clutching her sleeve. It was pure tenderness. And yet, something inside Edward twisted. He told himself it wasn't jealousy, it was concern. It wasn't fear, it was propriety. He replayed the moment, the way she held his son, the way the camera's soft night light traced her silhouette. Then he saw her lower her head and whisper something to the sleeping child, words the camera couldn't capture. He froze. His chest tightened, and before reason could form, anger filled the space where pain belonged. When he entered the nursery that morning, the twins were still asleep. Maya sat by the window, sunlight touching her face. She turned, smiling gently. "Morning, Mr. Hawthorne." They slept through again. Edward's voice came out sharper than he meant. "I saw the footage." Her smile faded. "Footage?" "The camera," he said. "In the ceiling." Maya stood slowly. "I didn't know there was one in here. It's for safety." "Safety," she repeated softly, her eyes clouding. "Or surveillance?" He ignored the question. "You were holding my son last night." "He woke up frightened," she said evenly. "He needed comfort. You should have called me." "I did what any caregiver would do." Edward's voice rose. "You don't touch them like that without permission." The sudden loudness made Eli stir, half awake, frightened. Maya stepped back instinctively, lowering her tone. "Please, not so loud. You'll scare them." That only made him angrier. The quietness, the calm, the unshaken dignity. "I trusted you," he said, "and I find you." "Find me what?" she interrupted softly. "Caring for your children?" Something inside him snapped. Before his mind could stop his hand, it happened. A sharp movement, a sound that cracked through the room like a branch breaking. The slap. Time froze. The small gasp that followed wasn't hers. It was Noah's. He had woken just in time to see it. The little boy's mouth trembled. "Daddy." Edward's world narrowed to the echo of his own mistake. Maya didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. She just stood there, hand at her cheek, eyes wide with disbelief. Not pain, but heartbreak. Then she said quietly, "Now they've seen it too." Those words pierced deeper than any scream could have. Caroline rushed in, startled by the noise. "Sir, what on earth?" "Leave us," Edward said quickly, his voice unsteady. But it was too late. The twins were crying again, clutching at Maya's skirt, hiding behind her legs. She bent down, her voice soft despite the tremor in her breath. "It's all right, babies. It's all right." Her calmness only made his shame louder. She turned to him, her voice trembling but steady. "I can forgive misunderstanding, but not mistrust, not violence." He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't form. Maya reached for her bag, her movements deliberate. "You need to call someone else. I won't work where fear lives." She took the twins' small hands, kissed each forehead, and whispered, "Be brave, even when grown-ups forget how." Then she left. The door clicked softly behind her, leaving a silence that felt like punishment. Hours later, Edward sat in his study staring at the half-drunk glass of water on his desk. He kept replaying it in his mind. Her stillness, her eyes, the sound of the slap. He'd hit people before in other ways, cutthroat meetings, sharp words, decisions that crushed competitors. But never this. Never someone who'd done nothing but bring peace. He checked the camera feed again, hoping somehow it would show a different version of the truth. It didn't. The boys refused breakfast, refused to speak. When he entered their room, they turned away. Noah whispered to his brother, "She's gone because Daddy got mad." Eli's reply broke him. "Then we can't be good anymore." That night, the crying returned, wild, relentless, familiar. The same house, the same sound, the same ache. Caroline approached him in the dark hallway. "Sir, please call her back, for their sake." Edward shook his head, voice hoarse. "She won't come back." Caroline hesitated, then said softly, "She might, but not for you, for them." He sat in the armchair near the window, staring out at the lake. The reflection of the moon trembled across the surface, broken by ripples. He whispered, "I only wanted to protect them." Caroline's reply was quiet, almost motherly. "Sometimes protection looks like control, sir, and control looks a lot like fear." The words settled over him like dust, gentle but heavy. The next morning, Edward tried to restore order. A new nanny arrived. Professional, efficient, polite. The twins screamed the moment she entered. Within an hour, she left in tears. Edward watched the car drive away and finally understood the truth. No order could survive without warmth. No system could replace presence. He went back to the nursery. The beds were unmade, the air still faintly carrying the scent of lavender from Maya's sweater. He sat on the floor where she had once sat, between the two small beds, and waited. For what? He didn't know. Maybe forgiveness, maybe a miracle. The night came again, and so did the crying. But this time Edward didn't call anyone. He tried to comfort the boys himself, clumsy, awkward, failing, until they cried themselves to sleep. When silence finally returned, he whispered into the dark, "I'm sorry." The house stayed silent, but for the first time, he wasn't sure if that silence was peace or punishment. It rained that morning. Not the heavy kind that soaks the ground, but a slow drizzle that seems to apologize for existing. The Hawthorne estate sat beneath a gray sky, its wide glass windows reflecting nothing but emptiness. Inside, the once busy halls were silent again. The smell of burnt toast lingered from the breakfast no one had eaten. And in the nursery, two small boys stared at the door as if waiting for it to open, waiting for a voice that would never come. Edward Hawthorne stood in the doorway watching them. Noah sat on the floor with his toy blocks untouched. Eli had wrapped himself in the small blanket Maya used to tuck around him at night. They didn't look up when their father entered. He crouched beside them, uncertain. "Boys, you need to eat something." No answer. He tried again, softer. "I made pancakes." Still nothing. Just the faint sound of Noah's breathing, fast and shallow. He reached for the toy car beside Eli, rolling it toward him. The child didn't move. Edward exhaled, rubbing his temple. He had negotiated billion-dollar mergers with less resistance than this. But the cost here was not money. It was silence. And silence was harder to fix. By noon, the staff moved carefully through the house, avoiding conversation. Even Caroline Mercer, the one who usually carried warmth like a secret flame, walked slower. She found Edward in the library surrounded by papers. "Sir," she began softly, "the boys haven't eaten since yesterday." "I know," he murmured. "I think they miss her." "I told you," he said, voice hardening to hide the guilt. She crossed a line. Caroline looked at him for a long moment. "Maybe you drew the wrong one." Her words stayed in the air after she left, heavier than the rain outside. That night, Edward poured himself a drink and sat in the dark study. The fire crackled, but its warmth couldn't touch him. He opened his laptop almost by instinct. The folder labeled "Security" blinked on the screen. For the second time, he played the footage from the night before the slap. There she was, Maya, sitting cross-legged, singing softly. The boys curled against her sides, sleeping in the kind of safety no camera could stage. He paused the video. Her face in the soft glow of nightlight looked peaceful. Not scheming, not overstepping, just present. He pressed play again, listening to the faint hum that had once irritated him. Now it felt like forgiveness he didn't deserve. The playback ended, replaced by the empty reflection of his own face on the dark screen. A man who had mistaken control for care. He shut the laptop with a quiet thud. The next morning, the boys were worse. Eli screamed when a new nanny tried to pick him up. Noah threw his breakfast at the wall. Within an hour, the woman packed her bag and left in tears. Edward followed her to the door. "You lasted longer than most," he said awkwardly. She shook her head. "It's not them, sir. They're just broken." When the door closed, her words echoed like a verdict. "Broken." He whispered it under his breath. "No, they're not broken. I am." By afternoon, Edward couldn't take the sound of his own guilt anymore. He grabbed his coat and keys and drove without thinking. Through the city, past the crowded streets, until he reached a small neighborhood on the outskirts of town. He parked across from a brick apartment building and sat there, unsure if he was brave enough to walk inside. He didn't even know why he knew this address. Perhaps because Caroline had quietly slipped it into his hand that morning. "In case you realize too late," she had said. Through the rain-smeared windshield, he saw her. Maya walking with an umbrella that had lost half its spokes. Her clothes were simple, her stride steady. Beside her, a little girl from the neighborhood held a stack of school books too heavy for her arms. Maya bent down to help, tucking the books under her own arm. The child grinned. Edward felt a strange ache, that same calm patience, the same steadiness she had given his sons, now given to a stranger. He watched as she reached the steps to her building. For a moment, he almost stepped out of the car. Then he saw the faint mark on her cheek, the one he'd left. His hand froze on the door handle. Shame rooted him in place. He watched her disappear inside. The window lights flickered on a few minutes later, a warm glow spilling onto the rain-slick street. That light hit the side of his face like mercy he didn't earn. Back at the estate, Caroline was waiting near the foyer. "You found her?" she asked. He nodded once. "Did you talk to her?" "No." "Then what did you get from going there?" He looked up at the grand staircase, the polished railings, the echoing emptiness. "A reminder," he said quietly, "that kindness doesn't need permission." Caroline's voice softened. "You can fix this, you know." He almost laughed. "You think a man like me gets forgiveness that easy?" She smiled faintly. "You're not asking me. You're asking the wrong person." That night, Edward sat on the floor of the nursery. The twins were restless again, half asleep, murmuring her name in their dreams. He watched them and whispered, "She'll come back. Somehow, she'll come back." He didn't know if it was hope or delusion, but for the first time, he chose to believe it. He took out a small notebook from the drawer, Lillian's old parenting journal. Inside, a note she had written years ago caught his eye. "If they ever wake up crying and I'm not there, tell them love doesn't leave. It waits in the quiet until you notice." He closed the book and leaned his head against the wall. The rain outside softened to a whisper, and in that whisper, he thought he heard Maya's voice, steady, gentle, forgiving. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was hope learning to speak again. The next morning, the boys woke to find a familiar scent in the air. Lavender. It wasn't real, just left over from the blanket still clutched in Eli's hands. But to them, it was enough. Downstairs, Edward opened his phone and deleted every nanny agency contact. Then, with shaking hands, he wrote a message. "Miss Williams, I owe you an apology. The children miss you. So do I. If you can find it in your heart, please come back. On your terms, not mine." He read it twice, then hit send. Outside, the rain finally stopped, and somewhere across the city, a phone lit up on a small kitchen table. Morning sunlight spilled through the wide windows of the Hawthorne mansion, gliding across polished floors that had not seen laughter in weeks. The air felt cleaner after the rain, but also fragile, like peace was something that might shatter if anyone breathed too loudly. Edward Hawthorne stood by the grand piano, staring at his phone. The message he had sent 2 nights ago was still marked read. No reply. The silence pressed against him harder than any accusation. Caroline Mercer entered quietly, carrying a tray of tea. "She hasn't answered?" He shook his head. "I don't expect her to." Caroline set down the tray. "Then why do you keep checking?" He didn't answer, because the truth was simple. He didn't know how to stop waiting. The twins thundered down the hallway, calling each other's names. Their laughter should have warmed him, but it only reminded him that the sound had returned too soon, too forced. They were pretending to be happy because they thought that was what he wanted. Caroline poured tea into a cup and slid it toward him. "You know, Mr. Hawthorne, some doors don't open because you knock louder. They open because you wait differently." He looked up. "And what does that mean?" "It means patience looks a lot like humility." Her words stayed with him long after she left. That afternoon, a soft knock came at the main door. Edward expected a courier, maybe another stack of documents. Instead, when he opened it, he froze. Maya Williams stood on the steps, raincoat folded over one arm, her expression calm but unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said quietly, "You shouldn't send apologies through a screen." He nodded slowly. "You're right." Her eyes moved past him toward the hall. "How are the boys?" "They miss you." "And you?" Edward hesitated. "I've missed what you brought into this house." Maya's gaze softened. but only slightly. Peace doesn't live in a person, Mr. Hawthorne. It lives in how you treat them. She stepped inside only after he moved aside. The twins heard her voice before they saw her. Within seconds, Eli came running from the playroom, nearly tripping over his toy truck. "Maya!" he shouted, wrapping his arms around her waist. Noah stood in the doorway, cautious. "You came back?" Maya knelt to their level. "For now. But there are new rules." Eli blinked. "Rules?" She smiled. "Rules that keep hearts safe." When she looked up, Edward was still watching from a distance, hands in his pockets. "You said you had terms," he said quietly. "Tell me." They met in the study later that evening. The same room where she had first sat for her interview now held a different kind of silence, one that waited for honesty, not authority. Maya laid a folded sheet of paper on the desk. "These are my conditions if I come back." Edward sat down, eyes on the list. Number 1, no cameras in private rooms. Trust must breathe, or it dies. Number 2, shared dinners once a week. The children need to see connection, not orders. Number 3, respect for personal time. A caregiver is not a shadow. Rest keeps compassion alive. Number 4, open communication. No decisions about the children without mutual discussion. Number 5, no raising voices. In this house, calm will be louder than anger. When he finished reading, Edward nodded. "All reasonable." Maya tilted her head slightly. "Reasonable isn't the same as easy." "I know," he said, "but I'll learn." She searched his face for a moment, looking for arrogance, for defensiveness. Finding none, she exhaled. "Then I'll return. For the children." A small pause. "And for what this house might still become." Dinner that night was quiet, but different. The table was set simply. No silver domes or waiting staff. Just soup, bread, and the soft chatter of 2 boys who couldn't stop smiling. Caroline brought in a bowl of fruit and whispered to Maya, "It's good to have you home." Maya smiled. "Let's call it a workplace of peace, not home yet." The twins giggled at the new rule. Eli asked, "Can we have dessert before bedtime?" Edward started to protest, but Maya raised a playful eyebrow. Sometimes a sweet moment helps dreams start soft. So dessert came first. And for once, Edward didn't correct anyone. Later, after the boys were asleep, Maya stepped onto the back porch. The lake shimmered in moonlight. She wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold, but from memory. Edward joined her quietly. "I didn't know what forgiveness looked like until you walked through that door today." She didn't turn to him. Forgiveness isn't walking back. It's walking differently. He nodded slowly. "Then I hope I learn to walk at your pace." They stood in silence for a while. The sound of crickets filled the space between words. Finally, Maya said, "I need to know you understand something. I didn't come back to erase what happened. I came back so the boys would know that pain doesn't end love. It teaches it." "I do understand," Edward said softly. "And I'm sorry that I let fear make decisions for me." She looked at him then, eyes gentle but firm. Fear is human. Staying after fear, that's what makes us real. The following morning, the twins woke to the smell of pancakes. Maya was in the kitchen flipping them, while humming the same lullaby she had sung the night they first slept. Eli climbed onto a stool beside her. "Daddy doesn't burn them anymore," he said proudly. Maya laughed. "Progress." Edward, standing in the doorway, smiled. "She's a good teacher." Caroline set the table. Well, it seems Peace decided to stay for breakfast. As they ate, together, the boys argued over who could pour syrup first. Edward leaned back, watching them with quiet wonder. The house no longer felt like a museum of loss. It breathed again, warm and alive. Maya noticed him watching. "Something on your mind?" "Just trying to remember when this place last sounded like laughter." She smiled. "Then don't remember. Just listen." That night, Edward removed the last of the surveillance cameras himself. One by one, the red lights blinked out until only soft darkness remained. He walked through the halls, hearing the echoes of his own footsteps change, from sharp to gentle, from lonely to human. When he reached the nursery, he found Maya asleep in a chair beside the twins' beds. Both boys were snuggled beneath their blankets, breathing easy. He stood there for a long time, not as a watcher this time, but as a witness. For a time, the Hawthorne estate felt almost ordinary again. Morning laughter echoed in the halls, the smell of coffee drifted through the kitchen, and the twins began to talk in full sentences instead of short bursts of fear. Maya often thought peace might be like a shy bird. You never trap it, you just stand still until it decides to rest near you. But peace rarely stays hidden from curiosity. It began with small whispers among the staff. The gardener heard it first at the market. Then Caroline Mercer caught two suppliers murmuring over invoices. A rumor that sounded like a question, and then like an accusation. The billionaire and the black nanny. No one said it directly to Maya, but the air changed. Conversations paused when she entered the room. Compliments arrived with strange smiles. "You've done wonders with the boys," one of the dinner guests told her. "Though I suppose children feel differently with someone of your warmth." She knew what warmth meant in that tone. It meant accessible, not equal. At dinner that weekend, a dozen guests gathered around the long table. The candles glowed gold, and laughter floated like champagne bubbles. Maya moved quietly, helping Caroline serve dessert. Across the room, she heard one guest whisper to another, "You'd think he'd hire someone from his circle. She doesn't exactly look like staff here." The comment slipped through the air like a cold draft. Maya didn't react, but her hand trembled slightly as she set down a plate. From the head of the table, Edward Hawthorne caught the shift in her posture. He stood, interrupting the laughter. "Excuse me, everyone." He walked to the sideboard, opened a folder, and placed a printed document on the table, a new staff chart. "Maya Williams will now hold the position of family liaison," he announced. "She'll coordinate all household and educational matters for the twins." The table went still. One man cleared his throat awkwardly. "That's quite a promotion." Edward met his gaze. "It's not a promotion, it's accuracy." Then he sat down, as if nothing had happened. Maya said nothing, but a small warmth rose in her chest. Not pride, but relief. Dignity spoken aloud has its own quiet sound. Later that evening, the twins had their first therapy session with Dr. Samuel Reed, a calm man with silver hair and kind eyes. He didn't bring toys, only questions. Eli sat on the couch, swinging his legs. "Do we have to talk?" Dr. Reed smiled. "Not if you don't want to. You can show me instead." The boy pointed to Maya. "She knows everything anyway." Dr. Reed nodded. "She helps you feel safe?" Eli shrugged, looking shy. "When she hums, my stomach stops hurting." Dr. Reed turned to Edward. "They trust her voice more than anyone's. That's the sound of healing starting." Edward said nothing, but the words sank deep, a reminder that love didn't always sound like his own voice. The next day, without warning, two cars pulled into the driveway. Out stepped Charles and Margaret Hawthorne, Edward's parents, the grandparents of the twins. Charles looked like time had pressed discipline into every line of his face. Margaret was elegant, composed, and already disapproving. Edward met them in the foyer. "You could have called," Charles answered coolly. "And hear another excuse about why we're not welcome. We wanted to see the boys." They were polite until they weren't. When Margaret entered the nursery and found Maya there, her smile froze. "So," she said lightly, "this is the woman I've been hearing about." Maya nodded respectfully. "Mrs. Hawthorne, the boys have been looking forward to seeing you." Margaret's gaze flicked to the drawings pinned on the wall. Bright pictures of trees and stars and a woman standing beside two children. "You let them draw you," she said, tone neutral but sharp. "They drew their world," Maya replied. "I didn't choose who they saw in it." Margaret's expression tightened. "Edward has handed them to a stranger." Maya met her eyes quietly. "Sometimes, strangers stay longer than family." The words landed softly, but stayed in the air like a bell that refused to stop ringing. Dinner that evening was a storm behind polite conversation. Margaret complimented the table settings, but ignored Maya's presence. Charles asked questions about the twins' schooling, each one edged with doubt. Edward answered patiently, though his jaw remained tense. Halfway through dessert, Margaret finally spoke what had been circling her thoughts. "They need structure, Edward, not sentiment. Lillian raised them with discipline. You've replaced that with emotion." Edward set down his fork. "You mean humanity?" "I mean weakness," she said firmly. The room went silent. Maya stood at the end of the table collecting dishes, pretending not to hear. Caroline glanced nervously between them. Edward leaned forward. "You came here to visit your grandchildren, not to insult their caregiver." Margaret's lips thinned. "I came to protect their future." He rose slowly, his voice calm but steady. "Then trust that I'm doing exactly that." Margaret looked from her son to Maya, her tone colder now. "We'll see what the courts think of your decisions." And with that, she left the table. Later, Maya stood on the porch, arms crossed, the night wind curling around her hair. Edward joined her, his voice low. "You didn't deserve that." She shrugged. "I've heard worse said more politely." He sighed. "They'll make this ugly." "Then we stay steady," she said. "The boys need to see what calm looks like when the world isn't." He looked out toward the dark lake, where the moon's reflection trembled, but did not break. "Sometimes I think peace only exists in moments like this," he murmured. Maya smiled faintly. "Moments are how peace learns to stay." Behind them, the house was quiet again, though its walls seemed to listen, as if even the old wood understood that calm wasn't the absence of conflict, but the courage to hold still when it arrives. 3 days after the grandparents' visit, an envelope arrived by courier. It was pale gray, thick, sealed with wax, the kind of letter that carried importance even before it was opened. Caroline found it first and brought it to the study. "Sir, this came by hand." Edward Hawthorne glanced up from his desk, already uneasy. "From whom?" "From your parents' attorney," she said. The silence that followed seemed to lengthen the room. Edward broke the seal. Inside were several crisp pages. He read once, then twice, then dropped the letter onto the desk. "They've filed a petition," he said quietly. Caroline frowned. "A petition?" "For custody." Outside, a storm gathered over the lake, clouds pressing low against the glass. By afternoon, The house felt heavier. The twins could sense it. Children always do. Eli asked, "Daddy, why is everyone whispering again?" Edward knelt beside him. "Because grown-ups forget that loud isn't the same as strong." But his voice trembled slightly. In the kitchen, Maya listened from behind the door. She had known this was coming the moment Margaret said, "We'll see what the courts think." Still, hearing it confirmed out loud made her chest tighten. That evening, when the twins were asleep, she found Edward standing by the window, watching the storm roll across the lake. He didn't look at her. "They think I'm unfit, that I've lost control." She stayed quiet, waiting. He continued, "They say I've let an employee influence my parenting decisions, that I've compromised my judgment." Maya took a slow breath. "And do you believe that?" He turned finally. "No, but I know what it looks like to the world." She folded her arms. "Then let them see what truth looks like too." He almost smiled, a tired, grateful expression. "Would you testify?" "If it helps keep peace for those boys," she said softly. "Yes." A week later, they stood outside the family court building. The rain had stopped, but puddles still shimmered on the pavement. Edward straightened his tie, his face pale. Maya placed a hand gently on his arm. "Don't fight them," she said. "Just tell the truth." He nodded. "You make that sound easy," she smiled faintly. "Truth always sounds easy. It's living with it that takes work." Inside, the courtroom was quiet and bright. The walls were lined with pale oak, the air thick with the hum of paperwork and muted voices. Judge Raymond Ellis presided, a calm man with thoughtful eyes, known for his patience. He greeted both parties with a nod. "Let's proceed." Charles Hawthorne took the stand first. His voice was steady, formal, rehearsed. "My son has endured tragedy," he said, "but his emotional state has rendered him incapable of making sound parental decisions. The children need stability, not experiments in affection." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Then Margaret Hawthorne testified. Her tone was cool, polished, precise. "I only wish to protect my grandchildren. They require consistency, discipline, and environment befitting their family. I don't question this woman's good intentions." Her eyes flicked toward Maya. "But compassion without structure is chaos." Maya sat still, hands folded in her lap. She had learned long ago that sometimes silence speaks louder than defense. When it was Edward's turn, he stood slowly. The microphone caught the rough edge in his breath. "My parents are right about one thing," he began. "I did lose control, not of my children, but of my grief. And in that loss, I forgot what they needed wasn't protection from pain, but presence through it." He paused, eyes lowering for a moment before continuing. "Miss Williams reminded me of that. She didn't replace their mother. She simply helped me remember how to be one half of a home again." His voice softened. "I make no excuses. I just ask this court to see what the children have become. Calmer, braver, themselves again." He sat down. Then came Maya's turn. She walked to the stand, not in fear but in quiet composure. Her dark blue dress was plain, her posture steady. When she spoke, her voice carried warmth that filled the courtroom. "I'm not a mother to them," she said gently, "and I never will be. I'm the one who stayed when they were too small to understand why the world had changed. I sang when they couldn't sleep. I listened when silence frightened them." She looked at the grandparents, not in challenge but with empathy. "The one who stays doesn't replace a mother. She keeps the light from going out until family finds its way back to itself." Even Judge Ellis looked momentarily moved. His gavel rested untouched on the desk. After testimony, the courtroom fell into that sacred quiet where words have already done their work. Outside, the storm clouds had cleared, and faint sunlight streamed through the windows. The judge spoke softly. "I'll review the evidence and issue a decision soon." But everyone in the room already sensed what direction the light was leaning toward. As they exited, a group of reporters stood near the steps, cameras ready. The questions came like soft darts. "Mr. Hawthorne, are you concerned about losing custody?" "Miss Williams, are you in a personal relationship with your employer?" Edward shielded the twins as Maya guided them to the car. She whispered to them, "Keep your heads high, little ones. Wind can't hurt roots that grow deep." Inside the car, the boys pressed their faces to the window. Eli asked, "Did we do something bad?" Maya smiled gently. "No, sweetheart. Grown-ups are just learning how to share love properly." That night, Edward couldn't sleep. He walked into the nursery where the twins were dreaming peacefully and sat between their beds, the same spot Maya had once chosen. He thought about his parents, how love could turn rigid when wrapped in fear, how fear could disguise itself as protection. He whispered into the darkness, "I'll get this right. For them. For you." Across the hall, Maya lay awake too, staring at the ceiling of her guest room. She wasn't worried for herself. She had survived worse than gossip and judgment. But for the twins, she prayed the world would be gentle. Her mother's old saying echoed in her mind, "When the wind rises, teach the house to sing, not to hide." She smiled to herself and closed her eyes. Tomorrow they would return to court, and whatever the outcome, she would tell the truth again. The courthouse smelled faintly of polished wood and rain-soaked coats. Morning light slanted through high windows, touching every face with the same cool silver hue. Lawyers, reporters, and family members all waiting for something final to be spoken. Edward Hawthorne sat at the long table beside Maya Williams, his fingers interlaced, knuckles white. Across from them, Charles and Margaret Hawthorne whispered quietly with their attorney. Even the twins sat still in the gallery with Caroline Mercer, clutching small stuffed toys for courage. The hearing had stretched 3 days. Every question had been asked twice, every document stamped and filed. Now, only silence remained. That deep kind of silence that arrives before truth decides which direction to fall. Judge Raymond Ellis entered with his usual calm. He adjusted his glasses, scanned the room, and said, "Before I read my ruling, I wish to speak plainly. This case is not only about custody, it's about the shape love takes when loss has bent it." The room stilled. Even the clicking of camera shutters slowed. He continued softly, "What I have seen here are 2 grandparents who wish to protect, a father who wishes to rebuild, and a caregiver who reminded all of them that protection means little without presence." Edward swallowed hard. He dared not move. "The law asks me to consider continuity of care," the judge went on. In simpler words, who gives the children steady hands when the world feels unsteady? He paused, glancing at Maya. "And those hands have been hers." Margaret shifted uncomfortably. Charles stared at the floor. Judge Ellis looked toward Edward. "Mr. Hawthorne, you have shown remorse and effort. That matters. I am granting full custody to you, with acknowledgement that Miss Williams's continued role as caregiver is in the children's best interest." The sound that followed wasn't applause, but the collective exhale of relief. Maya closed her eyes. Edward pressed his hands against his face, breathing out something that was almost a prayer. Even the twins seemed to sense what had happened. Eli turned to Caroline, whispering, "Does that mean we stay home?" Caroline smiled through tears. "It means you belong where your hearts already are." As the courtroom emptied, reporters called questions from the corridor, but Edward waved them off. He turned to Maya. "You spoke for us when I couldn't find words. Thank you." She shook her head gently. "You spoke too, when you let truth stand on its own." They walked out together into sunlight that felt new. The city hummed quietly around them. No fanfare, no thunderous celebration, just the small sounds of people moving on with their day. A photographer captured a single moment. Edward holding one twin's hand, Maya holding the other, Caroline walking just behind. In the picture, no one looked posed. They simply looked steady. Back at the estate, the staff gathered in the foyer. Caroline announced, voice bright but trembling, "The children are home to stay." A ripple of applause spread, soft and genuine. Maya bent down as the twins ran toward her, their laughter echoing through the high ceilings. Eli held up his stuffed bear. "Captain Sleep can stay too, right?" She laughed. "Of course. Every hero deserves to rest where he's loved." Noah looked up at Edward. "Does this mean Grandma and Grandpa are mad?" Edward knelt. "No, son. It just means they need time to understand." He hesitated, then added quietly, "Sometimes even love has to learn new rules." Maya watched the exchange and saw something shift, not only in him, but in the house itself. The rooms seemed brighter, less haunted by memory. The walls, once heavy with silence, now breathed like living things again. That evening, the family gathered around a simple dinner. No servants, no guests, just soup, bread, and the faint glow of sunset slipping through tall windows. Eli spoke between bites. "Can we visit Grandma again?" Edward smiled. "Yes, maybe when things feel quieter." Noah added, "Can Maya come too?" Everyone looked at her. She answered softly, "If I'm invited, I'll be there." Edward's gaze lingered. "You're always invited." Caroline raised her glass. "To home, however we find it." They clinked glasses gently. The moment was ordinary, but in its ordinariness, it felt sacred. Later, when the twins were asleep, Maya stepped outside onto the porch. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. She heard the door open behind her. Edward joined her quietly, holding 2 mugs of tea. He offered one. "Peace offering." She accepted it. No more apologies needed, just consistency. He nodded, smiling. "That I can promise." They stood side by side, listening to the soft rustle of leaves. Across the lake, the city lights glowed faintly, a constellation of human hope. Maya said, "You know, courts can only decide where children live. They can't decide where they feel safe." Edward glanced at her. "And where do you think that is now?" She looked through the glass toward the nursery window. "Wherever love stopped being afraid." The words hung there, gentle as the wind, before fading into quiet. In the days that followed, the headlines softened. Some papers ran small stories. Hawthorne custody case ends in reconciliation. Others focused on the image captured outside the courthouse, the family walking hand in hand. But what people remembered most was one quote that appeared in the article's final line, Maya's words to the reporter who had asked if she felt vindicated. "There's no victory in love, only continuation." It spread quietly across the internet, shared without argument or noise. Back at the mansion, the household found its rhythm again. The twins began therapy sessions twice a week with Dr. Reed, who noted steady progress. "They're learning that calm can last," he said. Belle, Edward's teenage daughter, returned from boarding school soon after. She watched Maya with cautious curiosity, unsure how to fit into the new balance. But when she saw how the boys slept without fear, she decided that maybe this woman wasn't a stranger after all. Caroline teased gently. Another heart won over. Maya laughed. "I don't win hearts, Caroline. I wait for them to open." The laughter that followed was quiet but full, a sound this house had waited too long to hear. That night, Edward walked through the empty halls, pausing by the nursery door. Inside, he could hear the faint breathing of his children, the hum of safety restored. He whispered into the stillness, "Thank you." Though he wasn't sure who he was thanking, Maya, fate, or the memory of Lillian that still lingered like a gentle light in the corners. Outside, the lake reflected the stars perfectly. And for the first time, Edward Hawthorne felt something he hadn't felt since before the accident. Not happiness exactly, but peace that no court could ever grant. For several weeks after the custody hearing, the world seemed to move in slow harmony. The boys began to sleep through the night. Belle settled back into her rhythm, sometimes helping Maya bake on weekends. The Hawthorne estate no longer felt like a mausoleum of silence. It hummed gently with the sound of ordinary life. Peace had a texture now, soft laughter over breakfast, the clink of cups, the rhythm of small feet racing down hallways. But peace has a way of drawing attention, especially when it blooms in a house where the world expects scandal. It started quietly, as most storms do. A journalist from a digital magazine sent a message to the Hawthorne Public Relations Office requesting an interview about domestic labor and modern family structures. Edward declined politely. He had no appetite for publicity. 2 days later, an article appeared online anyway. The headline shimmered on millions of screens. Forgery, favoritism, and the billionaire's Maid. The piece claimed that Maya Williams had faked her credentials, that her references were fabricated, her certifications counterfeit. It even included what looked like official letters from a childcare board that didn't exist. At first, Edward didn't believe it. He read the headline once, then again, then closed his laptop. When he reopened it, the article had already been shared across news sites. Within an hour, his phone began to buzz. Advisors, lawyers, the head of his company's communications team, all saying the same thing: distance yourself. That afternoon, Caroline entered the study carrying the printed article. "Sir," she whispered, "the story's everywhere." He rubbed his forehead. "I know. What will you do?" He stared at the photo at the top of the article, a picture of Maya taken at the courthouse, smiling faintly beside the twins. Her expression was calm, almost serene, as if she knew storms came and went, and truth stayed still. "I'll talk to her first," Edward said quietly. He found Maya in the garden, kneeling beside the roses. The boys were nearby, trying to plant seeds in mismatched rows. "Maya," he said. She turned, immediately sensing his unease. "What happened?" He handed her the printed article. She scanned it, her face unreadable. When she finished, she folded the paper carefully and placed it on the ground beside her. "You believe this?" The question wasn't angry, just steady. Edward's throat tightened. "I don't want to, but there are procedures. My advisors..." She cut him off gently. "Your advisors don't tuck your sons into bed." He looked away. "They're asking me to suspend you until it's cleared." The air seemed to still around them, Even the wind went quiet. Finally, Maya nodded. Then I'll leave tonight. You don't have to. Yes, I do. If I stay now, it will hurt them. Eli overheard and dropped his small shovel. Hurt who? Maya knelt and gathered him, close. No one, baby. We're just giving grown-ups time to think. Noah frowned. Did we do something wrong? Maya smiled softly. You did everything right. That's why I'm proud of you. That evening, the house returned to a silence Edward recognized. The old kind, heavy and accusing. Maya packed a single bag. She didn't cry. She had learned long ago that leaving quietly was often the only way to stay whole. Belle found her near the door. Is it true? The girl asked. Maya shook her head. It's noise, Belle, and noise dies down when no one feeds it. But Dad, your father's trying to protect his name, Maya said gently. I hope one day he learns to protect his truth instead. Belle's eyes filled with tears. Please don't go. Maya brushed a strand of hair from her face. Goodbyes don't last forever, sweetheart. They're just pauses. When the car pulled away, the twins pressed their faces to the window, small hands waving in confusion. Edward stood at the top of the steps, watching until the taillights disappeared into the night. The next morning, the house seemed colder. The twins refused breakfast. Eli asked, Is Maya mad at us? Edward tried to smile. No, she just needs time. But we didn't say sorry. For what? Eli shrugged, eyes filling with tears. For her leaving. Edward's heart sank. How do you explain adult fear to children who only understand presence and absence? By afternoon, both boys had regressed. Eli hid under his bed, clutching his bear. Noah refused to speak at all. Their therapist, Dr. Reed, arrived after Caroline called him in desperation. He watched quietly, then said, Children don't separate emotion from memory. When they lose someone they trust, even for a short time, their whole body remembers the loss. Edward sat down heavily. So what do I do? Dr. Reed placed a hand on his shoulder. You show them that staying isn't a person. It's a promise. That night, Edward sat at his desk reading through old documents. He opened Maya's file again. Her references, background checks, certificates. Everything had been verified when he hired her. The article's claims didn't match a single record. Something was off. He searched his email archives, tracing correspondence between his HR staff and an agency contact. Then he saw it, a missing attachment in a forwarded message. The letter they had used to accuse her of forgery wasn't part of the original email. It had been added later. His stomach turned. He called Caroline. Get me the digital forensics team. I want to know who sent that version to the journalist. She didn't ask questions. Right away. Meanwhile, upstairs, Belle sat on the twins' bed, holding their hands as they cried. You remember what Maya said? She whispered. Goodbyes don't last forever. Noah sniffled. Do you think she'll come back? Belle looked toward the Iabian window, where rain had started again, faint and rhythmic. I think truth always finds its way home, she said softly. At midnight, Edward received a call. It's confirmed, the investigator said. The document was forged. The upload came from an IP linked to your father's legal office. For a long moment, Edward couldn't speak. His voice, when it came, was low and steady. Thank you, he said. Keep the evidence secure. Tomorrow I'll make this right. He hung up, staring out at the storm beyond the windows. The house felt alive again, as if the walls themselves had been waiting for him to see clearly. He whispered to the quiet room, You were right, Maya. Noise dies when truth speaks. Across the city, Maya sat by a small window in her apartment, sipping tea she didn't really taste. The rain tapped gently against the glass, like an old friend reminding her she wasn't forgotten. Her phone buzzed once, a single notification. It wasn't a message, not yet, but she knew it would come. And somewhere deep inside, she smiled. The next morning, gray light filtered through the curtains of the Hawthorne estate. The house still felt empty, but not silent anymore. More like it was breathing again, slowly, painfully, as if it knew something was about to shift. Edward Hawthorne hadn't slept. The forged documents lay on his desk, evidence printed and marked. He stared at them, unable to decide whether to feel angry or ashamed. His father's name wasn't on any of the files, but the digital trail pointed directly to the legal office that handled the family's affairs. He thought about confronting them, but the idea felt hollow. What could words change between people who believed control was love? Outside his study, footsteps padded softly across the floor. It was Belle. She paused at the door, holding her phone close to her chest. Her eyes were red but determined. "Dad," she said, "I think I can fix this." Edward turned slowly. "What do you mean?" "I found something." She walked over, placing her phone on the desk. "Remember when Mom was alive? She had her email backed up on my account because she didn't trust your company servers." He frowned, confused. "Yes? Well, some of those backups are still there. They include old correspondence from your HR team." Edward leaned forward as she opened a file. There, in black and white, was the original email from the childcare board, the one that confirmed Maya's credentials years ago. No missing attachments, no inconsistencies. Belle whispered, "The forgery was forged." Edward closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling a breath that felt like the first honest one in weeks. "You saved her," he said softly. Belle shook her head. "No, she saved us first." Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. "Dad, we can't let this end in silence. People already think she lied. You need to tell them the truth." Edward looked at his daughter, really seeing her for the first time, not as a child who needed protecting, but as a young woman carrying the same moral backbone he'd once admired in her mother. "I'll call the lawyers," he began, but Belle interrupted. "No, lawyers made this mess. Let me talk." He hesitated. "To who?" She smiled, nervous but brave. "Everyone." By afternoon, the story had spread further. More headlines, more speculation. Social media swirled with judgment. The billionaire's mistake. The nanny's deception. Belle walked past the security gate of the mansion, wearing her school blazer and holding a piece of paper. A group of reporters stood waiting. Caroline rushed after her. "Belle, are you sure about this? Your father?" Belle nodded gently. "He'll understand later. Maya needs someone to speak now." She stepped up to the small podium by the gate, the one the Hawthorne staff used for press statements. Her hands shook as she unfolded the paper. Cameras flashed, their lights cold and impatient. She took a deep breath. "I don't have a press secretary or a script," she began, voice steady despite the tremor in it. "I just have the truth." The crowd quieted. Everyone's saying Miss Williams lied about who she is, but the only lie is the one being printed. The papers she used were real. The so-called forgery was created by someone else. Someone afraid of what it means when a woman of kindness earns power through trust. She paused, letting the words breathe. "She didn't steal peace from us. She gave it back. She stayed when everyone else left. And if you think that makes her less worthy because she works with her hands instead of signing paychecks, then maybe the problem isn't her name. It's what we call value. The last sentence hung in the air. Even the cameras hesitated, as if uncertain whether to record or to bow. Inside the house, Edward watched from the window, pride and sorrow colliding in his chest. Caroline whispered, "She's her mother's daughter." He nodded. And maybe the teacher we all needed. The video went viral within hours. People began reposting it with captions like, "Compassion has no job title." Letters poured in, some handwritten, some digital, filled with gratitude, apologies, and donations to children's charities. One message stood out. A simple email addressed to the Hawthorne estate from a user named M. Williams, gracecare.org. It read only, "Tell Belle thank you for her courage. I'll see the boys soon." The following morning, Maya returned. No headlines, no grand arrival. Just the sound of her soft knock on the front door and the twins' feet pounding down the stairs before anyone else could reach it. They collided into her arms, nearly knocking her backward. Eli squealed, "You came back!" Maya kissed his forehead. "I told you, goodbyes don't last forever." Noah looked up at her solemnly. "Did the bad people say sorry?" Maya smiled. "Some truths don't need apologies. They just need to be seen." Belle appeared behind them, holding out her phone. "The world saw it, Maya. They believe you now." Maya's eyes glistened. "Then maybe they'll start believing in each other too." Edward stepped forward, voice rough. "I should have protected you better. I'm sorry for the damage my silence caused." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Silence can be fixed, Mr. Hawthorne. You fix it by filling it with truth." That night, the house glowed like it hadn't in years. The dining room was alive again. Belle laughing with the twins, Edward actually smiling, Caroline humming as she served pie. Maya sat quietly, letting the noise wrap around her like a blanket. She wasn't used to being the center of attention. Peace, to her, was the absence of chaos, not applause. After dinner, Belle hugged her tightly. "I think Mom would have liked you." Maya smiled. "Then maybe I already know her through you." Later, when the children were asleep, Maya stepped onto the porch. Edward joined her, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "I still don't understand how you stay so calm," he said. She looked at the stars. "Because storms end, and people forget the rain once they feel the sun again." He chuckled softly. "And what happens when the rain comes back?" She turned to him, her expression serene. "Then we plant something that needs it." They stood side by side, the air gentle between them. The kind of silence that holds meaning rather than distance. Behind them, the faint sound of laughter drifted from upstairs. The children were safe, Belle was at peace, and the world, for now, was quiet. Maya took a sip of her tea and whispered, "It's never about winning. It's about staying." In the weeks that followed the scandal's quiet ending, the Hawthorne estate learned to breathe differently. No newspaper vans camped outside anymore. No calls from lawyers or journalists. The noise had finally gone elsewhere. What remained was the softer music of ordinary life. Laughter drifting from the kitchen, the scrape of chairs on the patio, the gentle hum of a house remembering it was a home. Maya Williams moved through her days quietly. She cooked, taught, read, listened. She wasn't a symbol anymore. She was just herself, which, to her, was enough. Belle returned from school each afternoon with stories to tell, no longer hiding behind her phone or earphones. Sometimes she helped Maya make tea, chopping lemons with clumsy precision. "You're terrible at slicing," Maya teased one afternoon. Belle laughed. Dad says I'm too impatient for the kitchen. Maybe, Maya said, but patience grows faster when someone shows you how to wait. Belle smiled, then whispered, I think you've shown him that too. Through the window, they could see Edward outside with the twins, building a small wooden playhouse under the oak tree. Sawdust floated in sunlight like tiny stars. Every few minutes, Eli shouted, Daddy, it's crooked! And Edward laughed, an unguarded, boyish laugh that sounded as if it had been buried for years and finally unearthed. Dinner was simple now. No silver domes or staff in uniforms, just soup, bread, fruit, and laughter that came easily. Caroline, sitting at the end of the table, raised her fork like a toast. This house finally smells like home again. Edward looked around the table and smiled. Because home isn't silence, it's this. Noah tilted his head. It's soup? Everyone laughed. Maya leaned over to whisper, soup and love, mostly love. The children beamed. For the first time, they seemed to understand that happiness didn't have to be loud to be real. After dinner, Belle joined Maya at the kitchen counter, where sketches were scattered across a notebook. What's this? Belle asked. Plans, Maya said, for something I've been thinking about. The drawings were rough but full of heart. Rooms labeled quiet corner, play therapy space, and story garden. At the bottom of the page, she had written in neat handwriting, the Hawthorne Williams Center for Family Healing. Belle read the words aloud, slowly. You're starting a center? Maybe one day, Maya replied. A place where caregivers, parents, and children can learn together. Where staying isn't just a word, it's a practice. Belle traced the title with her finger. It's beautiful. Edward walked in just then, wiping his hands on a towel. Beautiful what? Belle held up the notebook. Her center idea. He looked down at the sketches, studying them. You drew this yourself? Maya nodded shyly. It's only a dream. I'm no architect. Edward smiled. Dreams are just plans waiting for courage. He sat beside her, reading the labels. I could help you find funding. I'm not asking for that, Maya said quickly. I know, he replied softly. That's why I want to. She looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. Then maybe we'll build something that outlasts both of us. A few days later, she took the twins to visit Dr. Samuel Reed for their therapy session. The boys ran ahead, excited to show him a picture they had drawn. A tall tree with 4 figures beneath it, a man, a woman, and 2 children holding hands. Dr. Reed admired it. And who are these? Eli pointed. That's Daddy. That's me. That's Noah. And that's Maya. Dr. Reed smiled. A complete forest of hearts. After the session, he spoke quietly to Maya. You've done remarkable work, you know. She shook her head. They did the work. I just stayed long enough for it to matter. He nodded. Staying is the hardest part. That evening, Maya returned to the estate with a small bag of groceries. The twins ran to help, her unpack, chattering non-stop. Edward was in the study, but the door was open now. No barriers, no surveillance, no distance. When she passed by, he looked up from his papers. The contractors say the new playhouse roof will be done tomorrow, she smiled. Then I'll tell the boys to start planning their housewarming party. Housewarming? Yes, she said. Every home, no matter how small, deserves a welcome. He nodded thoughtfully. So does every heart. Later that night, the twins were in bed. Belle was reading upstairs, and the house had settled into a soft quiet. Maya sat at the kitchen table with her notebook open, refining her sketches for the center. The lamp cast a golden pool of light around her. Edward joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. "You're working late." "Dreaming late," she corrected. He set the cups down. "I thought dreams were supposed to rest at night." She smiled. "Some dreams don't sleep until they're built." He looked at the sketches again. "What would you need first?" "A place," she said softly, "and people willing to listen." He pointed toward himself. "Then you've already got both." They sat together in companionable silence. Outside, the lake reflected the stars, smooth and still. When Maya finally stood to leave, Edward said quietly, "You've changed this house." She shook her head. "The house changed itself. It just needed permission." He smiled. "And what about me?" "You stopped protecting your pain," she said. "That's how people start healing." Her words lingered after she left the room, floating like the scent of tea and old wood. Upstairs, Belle checked on the twins one last time. Both were fast asleep, their small faces peaceful. She turned off the lamp and whispered, "Thank you, Maya," even though Maya couldn't hear her. Before bed, Edward stepped onto the porch. The night air was cool, the kind that carries both memory and promise. He looked at the horizon, imagining a future shaped not by loss, but by what had been rebuilt from it. In the distance, lightning flickered, faint, harmless, like the sky reminding the earth that storms still existed, but they no longer ruled it. He closed his eyes, breathed in the quiet, and smiled. The rain had passed by morning, leaving the air washed and clear. The Hawthorne estate shimmered under sunlight that felt almost deliberate, as if the sky itself was giving permission to begin again. Inside, Maya Williams sat at the long dining table with her sketches spread around her. Pencil drawings of rooms and corridors, notes in neat handwriting, tiny hearts marking ideas she loved most. The house was quiet except for the sound of her pencil scratching against paper. When Edward Hawthorne entered, she didn't look up. "You're early," she said, smiling faintly. "I couldn't sleep," he replied. "You're planning something big." "I'm planning something necessary," she said softly. "Healing shouldn't stop at this house." He sat opposite her, leaning forward. "Tell me." She slid a paper toward him. It showed a large building drawn in simple lines, not grand like the mansion, but warm and open, full of light. "This is what I want to build," she said. "A center for families like ours, parents who are grieving, children who are afraid, caregivers who've forgotten that their own hearts need rest too." Edward studied the drawing. "It's beautiful," he said. "It's unfinished," she corrected. "Like most of us." She pointed to small notes in the margins. "Here, a room for quiet play. There, a space for parents to talk without judgment. Every wall would be soft-colored. No sharp edges, no cold corners." He smiled slightly. "You've thought of everything." "Not everything," she admitted. "I don't know how to make people believe in it yet." That afternoon, they met with Dr. Samuel Reed, the twins' therapist, in a sunlit office downtown. Files lined the walls, but the smell of coffee and the sound of wind chimes made the space feel more like a sanctuary than a clinic. Dr. Reed listened carefully as Maya explained her idea. "A trauma-informed childcare center," she said, "but built like a home, not a hospital. People learn to trust faster when a place feels safe to touch." Dr. Reed nodded. "You're describing what Harvard calls the serve and return model, the science of responsive care. When a child cries and someone answers, the brain builds bridges instead of barriers." Maya smiled. "Exactly. But textbooks don't always teach what happens when the person who cries is grown." Edward added quietly. She's seen what textbooks miss. The science of staying. Dr. Reed's expression softened. Then you've already found your mission statement. A week later, they stood before a small group of potential investors and community partners. The boardroom was sleek, cold, all glass and chrome. The kind of room that smelled of money but not compassion. Maya sat at the end of the long table, her notes in a folder she had folded and unfolded too many times. She wasn't nervous for herself, only for the idea. One investor, a woman with an elegant scarf and an expression sharp as glass, glanced at the proposal. A live-in caregiver running a foundation? That's unusual. Maya met her gaze calmly. So is kindness that lasts. Another investor chuckled politely. Do you have management experience? I have something better, Maya replied. Endurance. The room went still. She continued softly. I've watched children learn to trust again. I've seen parents remember how to speak gently. You can study all the theories in the world, but healing isn't theory. It's proximity. It's showing up and staying until safety grows roots. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Edward leaned forward, his voice steady. Miss Williams isn't asking for charity. She's asking for partnership. What we're building isn't a business. It's a model for repair. He paused, looking around the table. We'll name it the Hawthorne Williams Center. Maya's breath caught. You don't have to do that. I do, he said simply, because this began with you. The meeting ended with quiet nods and polite handshakes. No one cheered, but Maya could feel something unspoken moving in the room. Curiosity that sounded a lot like belief. That evening, she sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the lake glow beneath the fading sky. Caroline joined her, carrying a folded newspaper. They're already writing about the proposal, she said. Maya sighed. Let me guess. They called me ambitious. Ambitious is a compliment now, Caroline said gently. The article's fair. It says you're creating something new in a world that keeps rebuilding the same old walls. Maya smiled at that. Then maybe it's time for a different kind of architecture. The twins came running down the steps, waving sheets of paper. Look, Eli shouted. We made our own center. Their drawings were colorful chaos. Stick figures, trees, hearts, and smiling suns. In one corner, a small sign read, Welcome home. Maya crouched down. What's this room? Noah pointed proudly. That's for hugs. She laughed softly. Then you're already better designers than I am. Edward stepped outside, still wearing his work jacket. I think we just hired our first art department. They all laughed. For a long while, no one mentioned funding or meetings or names. They simply stood watching the children draw, the paper fluttering like small flags of hope in the evening breeze. Later, when the boys were asleep, Maya sat in her room, surrounded by her sketches. She thought about all the places she had worked. Houses filled with wealth but starved of affection. Institutions where efficiency replaced empathy. She whispered into the quiet, maybe this time, we'll build something that doesn't need to be rebuilt. On her bedside table, the notebook lay open. She wrote a single line beneath the header blueprint. Begin where safety begins, in the heart that stays. She underlined it once, gently, as if sealing a promise. Downstairs, Edward reviewed the paperwork. The legal details, the projections, the timelines, all of it looked solid. But when he reached the last page, where her handwriting appeared in the margins, he felt something else rise. Gratitude that no contract could measure. He closed the folder and whispered, This is what Lillian would have wanted. Not perfection, but continuation. Outside, the night deepened. The air was cool, clean, full of possibility. Somewhere, an owl called softly through the trees. Maya, half asleep, heard it and smiled. The sound reminded her of the first nights with the twins, the way even silence seemed to watch over them. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. But tonight, there was stillness. The kind that means a story has shifted from survival to purpose. Morning came with the kind of light that felt earned. Not loud or golden, but soft. Spilling across the courtyard of the new Hawthorne Williams Center like a blessing that had waited its turn. The building stood just beyond the edge of the city, surrounded by oaks and magnolias. Its walls were pale cream, its windows wide and full of sky. There were no marble steps or grand statues, just a ramp, a garden, and a sign etched in modest bronze. The Hawthorne Williams Center for Family Healing. Maya stood before it, her heart steady but full. She had chosen not to wear anything extravagant, just a soft blue dress, the same color as calm water. Beside her, Edward adjusted his tie and whispered, "You ready?" She smiled. "For this, I've been ready most of my life." The parking lot slowly filled with guests. Journalists, donors, caregivers, families, and neighbors. There was no red carpet, only a path lined with flowers planted by the twins. Each bloom had a small wooden tag with a single word burned into it. Patience, safety, joy, stay. Inside, the air carried a newness that buildings rarely have. The walls were painted in gentle tones of sage and ivory, sunlight pouring through skylights like kindness made visible. Belle stood by the registration table, organizing name tags. The twins followed her, handing out programs. Eli beamed at every visitor. "That's my mom's drawing," he said proudly, pointing at the center's logo, a heart inside a circle, drawn in a child's shaky lines. Maya laughed quietly. "Not your mom, Eli, just Maya." He grinned. "You can be both." When the ceremony began, the crowd gathered in the courtyard beneath the oak trees. A small wooden stage had been built, decorated with garlands of leaves. Dr. Samuel Reed gave the opening remarks. "Healing is not the end of pain," he said, his voice low and kind. "It is the place where pain learns to rest." Then he turned toward Maya. "This center began as an idea drawn on a kitchen table. Today it becomes a promise we all share." He gestured for Belle to step forward. She looked nervous, her speech trembling slightly in her hands. Maya squeezed her shoulder. "Breathe, sweetheart. Just speak like you're talking to someone who needs to hear the truth." Belle looked out at the crowd. The microphone crackled softly, then stilled. "My name is Belle Hawthorne," she began. 2 years ago, I thought my family was broken beyond repair. Then a woman came into our house and didn't fix it. She just refused to leave it broken." A ripple of emotion moved through the crowd. "Pain," Belle continued, her voice clearer now, "isn't weakness. It's proof you tried. And this place, this center, is where people can keep trying, no matter how long it takes." The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was gentle, like rain on a roof. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash through her. When it was her turn to speak, she walked to the microphone slowly, her footsteps soft on the wooden stage. "I've worked in many homes," she said, her voice even and warm. "Some had walls of marble and silence so thick you could hear your own heart echo. But I've learned something simple. Every child, every parent, every person is asking the same question. Am I safe to love and be loved here? She paused. This center exists to answer that question. She told them about the serve and return method that Dr. Reed had described, the science of listening and responding, the simple act of staying when someone reaches out. It's not magic, she said. It's attention. It's what happens when we choose not to look away. As she finished, Edward joined her on stage. He didn't speak. He simply stood beside her, a quiet presence. The photographers took pictures, but she didn't notice. The applause rose again, soft but steady, like waves meeting shore. After the speeches, guests toured the building. In the story garden, children sat on colorful mats drawing pictures of their families. In the quiet room, parents drank tea and exhaled together in long, unguarded sighs. Caroline stood by the kitchen, laughing as she handed out cookies shaped like hearts. "We're feeding souls and stomachs today," she said with her usual cheer. Maya walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, memorizing the light. Every window reflected not just her image, but the memory of what had been built from almost nothing. Grief, perseverance, and faith woven together until they resembled love. Toward sunset, when most of the guests had left, she returned to the main hall. The space was empty now, except for a new mural on one wall. A group of children had spent the afternoon painting it. A long stretch of sky, a lake, and 4 figures standing hand in hand. Underneath, written in careful childlike letters, was one word: safe. Maya traced the letters gently with her fingertips. She didn't need to ask who had painted it. Edward entered quietly. "They refused to go home until it was finished," he said. She smiled. "Then it's perfect." He watched her for a long moment. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were saving my children, but you saved me too." She turned toward him, eyes calm. "I didn't save you, Edward. I just reminded you how to stay." Night crept in slowly. The last of the light glowed against the windows like a candle behind glass. Maya stayed in the hall after everyone left, the keys cold in her hand. In the far corner hung a framed photo of Lillian, Edward's late wife, the mother of the twins. The picture had been placed there quietly, with no label or plaque, just presence. Maya walked over and stood before it. She spoke softly, almost a whisper. "We kept them safe." Her reflection in the glass looked like another person standing beside Lillian. 2 women separated by time but joined by care. Outside, the oak leaves rustled. The sound could have been wind, or maybe just the house sighing with relief. Later, she stepped outside to where the last guests were leaving. Belle was helping pack up chairs, her face glowing in the warm dusk. The twins were chasing fireflies, their laughter floating through the twilight like bright, living stars. Edward came to stand next to her. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" She nodded. "Not just the building, the staying." He smiled quietly. "You've built something that even silence can't undo." She looked out at the fading light and said softly, "Then maybe silence has learned to rest too." The camera of the world, if it were still watching, would fade here, on a woman standing between past and future, surrounded by laughter, her heart calm, her purpose clear. The morning after the opening, the center no longer smelled of flowers or fresh paint. It smelled like life. The kind that leaves traces, crayons on tables, forgotten jackets on chairs, laughter echoing down the hallway. Maya walked through the building before anyone else arrived. The lights were dim, the floors gleaming. Her steps were slow, deliberate, almost like prayer. Every door she passed whispered a different sound. Low voices, soft music, the hum of a coffee machine warming up. She smiled. This was what she had wanted all along. Not applause, not attention, but ordinary noise. By 10 o'clock, the first families began to arrive. A single mother with a toddler on her hip came to ask about support groups. A father carrying a baby stroller looked nervous until one of the staff offered him tea. Two teenage volunteers painted small hearts on the hallway walls, covering tiny scuffs from the day before. Maya greeted each person with the same warmth. No scripted phrases, no distance. Just the small human gestures that turned strangers into guests. When Edward walked in with the twins, she smiled. "You're early." He grinned. They insisted. They want to help. Eli tugged her sleeve. "Can I paint hearts too?" "Of course," she said. "Every wall needs more love." By noon, the building was humming. In one room, Dr. Reed led a parent class on emotional regulation. In another, Caroline served lunch to families too tired to cook. Belle ran the children's reading hour, sitting cross-legged on the floor. A group of kids gathered around her like petals around the center of a flower. Edward was helping a group of fathers build toy boxes in the courtyard. He had rolled up his sleeves, sawdust dusting his arms. When Maya passed by, he looked up and said, "I'm learning new skills." She teased gently. "Including how to listen?" He smiled. "Working on it." At one point, he crouched to help a small boy tie his shoes. The boy's hands trembled with frustration. Edward didn't rush him. He simply guided. When the knot was finally made, the child beamed. Maya, watching from a distance, thought quietly, "This is what healing looks like when it's disguised as kindness." Later that afternoon, as sunlight slanted through the large windows, Maya felt a presence she hadn't seen in years. A woman stood in the doorway, dignified, with streaks of gray in her hair and eyes that carried both strength and apology. "Maya," she said softly. Maya froze for half a heartbeat. "Mama?" Angela Williams stepped forward, holding her purse tightly against her chest, as if it could guard her from the moment. "I saw the article about the center," she said. "I wasn't sure if you'd want me here." Maya took a breath. The air between them felt both heavy and fragile. "I didn't think you'd come," she admitted. "I almost didn't," Angela said. "But then I realized I'd spent too long running from things that could have healed if I'd just stayed." The words landed gently, but deeply. They sat in the garden behind the center, the hum of activity fading into birdsong. For a while, neither spoke. Maya watched the twins in the distance, helping Belle water flowers. Angela said quietly, "You learned to stay where I couldn't." Maya turned to her, eyes steady. "And you taught me what leaving costs." Angela looked down. "I didn't know how to raise a child when everything in me was still breaking." Maya's voice was calm, not accusing. "I know that now." "I came to say I'm sorry," Angela whispered. Maya reached over, touched her mother's hand. "You don't have to ask forgiveness to start again. Just be here." Angela's eyes glistened. "Is that enough?" "For today," Maya said softly. "It's more than enough." They sat in silence, two women connected by blood and distance, finally allowing both to exist without shame. Inside, the rhythm of the center continued. Parents talking in low voices, children laughing, volunteers moving gently between rooms. Maya returned to the hallway, her mother beside her. Edward met them near the reception desk, offering his hand with quiet respect. "It's good to meet you, Mrs. Williams," he said. Angela smiled faintly. "It's good to see what my daughter built." Eli ran up, waving a drawing. "Look, Grandma, I drew you," Angela knelt down, touched by the words she hadn't heard in years. "Grandma, huh?" Noah added. "You can come back tomorrow if you want." Angela laughed softly. "Maybe I will." Maya caught Edward's gaze. There was gratitude there, unspoken but understood. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't need a ceremony. It only needs a chance to repeat a moment kindly. That evening, the staff gathered in the center's small kitchen. Caroline served stew. Belle handed out slices of cornbread. Dr. Reed raised his glass. To beginnings that come disguised as endings. Everyone clinked cups, and the laughter that followed filled the room with warmth that felt old and familiar. Maya glanced around at the faces, the helpers, the learners, the families who had found a place to rest. It struck her how each one of them carried some form of scar, visible or not. And yet here they were, talking, laughing, staying. When the night grew late, she stepped into the hallway alone. The building was quiet now, but not empty. The faint echo of daytime life still lingered. A child's giggle, a lullaby, the creak of a chair. She whispered to the quiet, "Home isn't a place. It's a rhythm, and we've learned the beat again." Edward found her there, leaning against the wall. "Long day?" he asked. She smiled. "A good one." He glanced toward the closed office doors. "How did it go with your mother?" "She's learning my language," Maya said. "Slowly, but she's learning." "And you?" Maya looked up at him, her expression serene. "I'm learning that love is still love, even with doors closed halfway." He nodded, eyes gentle. "You make forgiveness sound like poetry." She shrugged. "Maybe it is. The kind that doesn't rhyme, but still belongs in the same story." They stood there for a while, letting silence do what words no longer needed to. Later, before locking up, Maya returned to the main hall. The mural from opening day gleamed faintly under the nightlights. She traced the golden lines of paint along the word "safe" and whispered, "We're still learning what that means." Outside, the stars were bright above the center's roof. The night didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt held. The weeks after the family reunion felt like steady breathing. The center thrived quietly, classes full, laughter returning to halls, and walls decorated with new drawings every day. But peace, as Maya had learned, was never without its tests. It began with an email on a Tuesday morning. The subject line was short, polite, and cold. Formal notice of financial review. Edward read it twice before calling Maya into his office. She entered with her usual calm, a notebook in hand. "What happened?" she asked, her voice even. He hesitated. "We've been flagged for a government audit," Maya frowned softly. "For what reason?" "It doesn't say. Just that someone filed an anonymous report, claiming misuse of funds." The words felt distant, unreal, like thunder echoing from somewhere far away but moving closer. They sat in silence for a moment. The ticking clock on the wall suddenly felt too loud. Maya took a slow breath. "I built safety," she murmured. "Now they'll take it again." Edward leaned forward. "Hey, look at me." She lifted her eyes. "We're not going to lose what we built. We'll stay transparent. We'll cooperate fully." But she didn't answer. Her mind had already gone somewhere else, back to years when her work had been questioned for no reason except who she was. The humiliation, the unspoken suspicion, the slow unraveling of trust. She could feel that old fear pressing at the edges of her ribs again. That afternoon, the auditors arrived. They were polite, professional, almost clinical. 3 people with clipboards, laptops, and careful smiles. One of them introduced herself as Clara Jensen. "We're simply reviewing compliance and transparency," she said gently. "It's routine." Maya nodded. "Routine doesn't usually come with warnings." Clara hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Then let's make this the exception." Over the next few days, files were opened, receipts examined, bank statements printed and reprinted. Every transaction was accounted for. Every expense traced. The staff grew quiet. The laughter that usually filled the corridors was replaced by the soft rustle of papers and the click of keyboards. Caroline whispered one afternoon, "Feels like someone's measuring our hearts with a ruler." Maya smiled weakly. "Then I hope they find they're beating honestly." At night, she stayed late in the office, reviewing every record again. Her hands trembled slightly as she organized folders by date and purpose. Edward walked in and placed a cup of tea beside her. "You should sleep," he said. "So should you," she replied. "I can't." "Neither can I." He pulled a chair next to her and began reading through the papers silently. For a while, the only sound was the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the rain beginning outside. After a long pause, Maya said quietly, "I used to think that once you built something good, it would stand on its own, but even goodness gets audited." Edward looked at her, his expression tender. "Then let them measure us. Truth will still fit the frame." The next morning, Maya found a letter slipped under her office door. No name, no signature, just a single line written in blue ink. "They want to see you fall again." She folded it carefully and locked it in a drawer. There was no point showing Edward. He already carried enough worry. Still, the message followed her through the day like a shadow. When Dr. Reed arrived for his weekly session with the twins, he found her sitting in the garden, staring at nothing in particular. "You're holding your breath again," he said softly. She sighed. "It feels like the walls are watching me this time." "They're not," he said. "You built these walls. They remember your steadiness. Don't let borrowed fear live here." His words were simple, but they anchored her. Later that week, Edward brought in a new consultant, Lucas Grant, a communications advisor known for calm transparency. He was in his 40s, soft-spoken, with the kind of smile that reassures without promising too much. Maya greeted him politely. "Another expert to tell us how to survive?" He chuckled. "No, just someone to remind you that surviving isn't the same as hiding." Together, they organized a press briefing to address rumors before they grew larger. Edward spoke plainly. "We welcome accountability. This center was built on trust, and we'll protect it the same way it was created. By staying." Maya stood beside him but said nothing. Sometimes presence was the truest form of speech. A week later, the auditors returned for their closing review. Clara smiled as she entered the office. "I think we're ready to share our findings." Maya's pulse quickened. Edward's hand brushed briefly against hers under the table. A silent reassurance. Clara opened her folder. "After extensive examination, we found no misuse of funds, no discrepancies. In fact, your records are among the most transparent we've seen." Maya blinked. "So we're cleared?" "Completely," Clara confirmed. "The anonymous tip appears to have come from a former employee, someone recently dismissed for falsifying attendance records." Relief flooded the room like light breaking through clouds. Caroline burst into tears quietly in the doorway. "So all that worry for nothing?" Maya turned to her, smiling gently. "Not for nothing. We learned how to stand still in the storm." When the auditors left, Edward gathered the staff in the main hall. He spoke softly, No grand speech, just sincerity. We built this place to teach families that transparency is love. Today, we proved it. Then he looked at Maya. Integrity isn't a wall, it's a window, and you've kept it clean. She smiled, shaking her head. Windows need cleaning often, but I'll take that compliment. The staff laughed, a light sound, the kind that carries relief in its rhythm. That night, after everyone left, Maya stayed behind again. The center was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock. She walked through the hall, touching the walls as if to thank them. She stopped in front of the mural where the children had once painted the word safe. Now, under the gentle glow of the lights, it shimmered faintly. Someone had added a new line beneath it in smaller handwriting. Integrity is the foundation of care. Maya smiled. She didn't need to ask who had written it. She whispered, "Then may this house never forget what keeps it standing." Outside, rain had stopped. The world smelled of clean beginnings, and though another storm might someday return, tonight the air was clear and the foundation held strong. A week after the audit ended, sunlight returned to the Hawthorne Williams Center like an old friend stepping through an open door. The tension that had once filled the halls lifted, leaving behind an air of gratitude and stillness. Even the plants near the windows seemed to stand taller, as though they too sensed relief. For the first time in months, Maya allowed herself to breathe without measuring the distance between calm and collapse. Every footstep echoed differently now, not with anxiety, but with quiet pride. The center had survived, but Maya didn't want to celebrate survival. She wanted to honor what it had cost. That morning, she stood in the main gallery with Belle, holding a folder of sketches. "I want to create something here," Maya said softly, looking around the sunlit walls. "Something that tells our story without words." Belle tilted her head. "A mural? Another one?" "Something deeper," Maya replied. "A space that shows what happens after breaking. Not just that we heal, but that we remember how." Belle thought for a moment. "Then we'll need gold." Maya smiled, recognizing the reference. Belle had been reading about the Japanese art of kintsugi, the practice of mending broken pottery with gold, turning every fracture into something luminous. "That's perfect," Maya said. "The Hall of Resilience." They began gathering materials, broken bowls and vases donated from families, each piece carrying its own story of use and repair. Caroline helped sort them, her sleeves rolled up. "Feels strange breaking things on purpose," she said. Maya smiled. "Sometimes you have to break what's fragile to see what holds." Edward offered the center's unused conference room for the project. "It's too formal anyway," he said. "This space should belong to something living." The following weekend, volunteers arrived. Parents, children, students, even one of the auditors, Clara Jensen, who said quietly, "I came to watch what healing looks like when it's not written in a report." The room filled with gentle sounds, the soft clink of porcelain, the whisper of brushes, the faint hum of quiet music playing from someone's phone. No one spoke loudly. They didn't need to. Maya guided the process like a conductor. "You don't hide the cracks," she said to the children. "You fill them with something precious, so they shine instead of disappear." Belle painted thin veins of gold along the lines of a shattered teapot. "Like scars?" one boy asked. "Yes," Maya said gently. "But instead of pain, they hold proof that you lasted." The boy nodded, smiling slightly, as if he finally understood something words had never explained to him before. Over the next few days, the gallery transformed. The walls were lined with shelves displaying repaired ceramics, cups, bowls, and fragments set in frames. Some were clumsy, others exquisite, all beautiful in their imperfection. Each piece glimmered where light met gold. Above the doorway, Belle painted the words, "Every crack is a story still shining." The sentence became a mantra whispered by visitors who walked through the hall, each step slower than the last, as if reverence demanded quiet. One afternoon, Maya brought the twins to see the finished room. Eli ran ahead, his shoes tapping on the smooth floor. "It's glowing," he said. Noah pointed at a tall vase in the center. "Who broke that one?" Maya smiled. "We all did, in different ways, and we all helped fix it." Dr. Reed joined them, standing beside Maya. "You've turned the science of trauma into art," he said. She laughed softly. "Art forgives more easily than people do." He nodded. "That's why people need art, to learn what forgiveness looks like." At the far end of the hall stood a long wooden table. On it lay a ceramic bowl split into 5 uneven pieces, each one repaired with gold in the shape of intertwined vines. Beneath it, a small brass plaque read, "The First Break," dedicated to every heart that learned to stay open. Beside the table, Edward placed a framed photograph of Lillian, smiling, alive, holding the twins as infants. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The gesture said everything. Grief could coexist with gratitude without either being diminished. When evening fell, Maya dimmed the lights so that only the gold lines shone. They gleamed like constellations scattered across the room, forming galaxies out of what had once been fragments. She stood in the center, surrounded by quiet awe. Edward joined her, his voice low. "It's beautiful," she nodded. "It's honest." He looked around. "You know, this might be the calmest place in the whole city." Maya smiled faintly. "Maybe because it doesn't pretend to be perfect." Belle entered, holding 2 small jars of paint. "The twins want to add their handprints," she said. "Of course," Maya replied. "They helped build this story too." The boys came running in, giggling as they dipped their hands in the gold-tinted paint. They pressed their palms against the wall beneath Lillian's photo, 2 small prints side by side. Eli looked up. "Will it stay forever?" Maya crouched beside him. "Maybe not forever, but long enough for someone else to see it and feel brave." Noah tilted his head. "Like when you sing." She smiled. "Exactly." As they left their mark, the last rays of sunset streamed through the high windows, spilling across the gold lines. The light caught every repaired edge, every shining flaw, until the whole room seemed to glow from within. After the guests had gone home, Maya stayed behind again. The hall was silent except for the faint echo of her own breathing. She walked slowly, touching the edges of a repaired bowl, then the plaque beneath Lillian's picture. Her fingertips lingered on the cool metal. "We made it," she whispered. Edward appeared in the doorway, watching her. "I was thinking," he said softly, "maybe this hall isn't about resilience. Maybe it's about reverence." Maya turned, smiling. "Maybe they're the same thing." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You've turned pain into light, Maya. I hope you know that." She met his eyes. Light was always here. We just needed to remember how to see it. They stood together, surrounded by gold and silence, the kind that doesn't feel empty but full. Outside, the moon rose over the lake, its reflection trembling but never breaking. Maya whispered to herself, "Nothing is flawless, and thank goodness for that." The air seemed to agree. Night fell slowly over the Hawthorne-Williams Center. The day's laughter had faded into memory, replaced by the hush that follows peace. Most of the staff had gone home, The hall lights glowed dim and golden, the kind of light that feels like a held breath. Maya stood alone in the hall of resilience, gazing at the gold-lined pottery that shimmered under the soft lamps. Each repaired piece reflected faint halos of light across the walls. The twins' handprints glowed faintly beneath Lillian's photograph. She whispered to the quiet, "We made it through every crack." The room didn't answer, but it seemed to listen. She turned off one lamp after another until only a single light remained near the center table. Then she heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, familiar. Edward Hawthorne stood at the doorway, his jacket over one arm, his expression gentler than she'd ever seen it. "I knew I'd find you here," he said. "You always do," she replied softly. He walked closer, his shoes echoing faintly on the polished floor. "I couldn't sleep." "Neither could I," she admitted. "Peace can be noisy when it's new." They stood side by side for a while, watching the gold lines glimmer in the low light. Edward finally spoke. "When this began, I thought you were fixing my children. Then I thought you were fixing my house. But I've realized you've been teaching me something different all along." Maya smiled faintly. "And what's that?" "How to stop fixing what isn't broken, and how to stay when it is." She looked at him then, really looked. The man who had once been defined by grief and guilt now stood with shoulders relaxed, voice steady, eyes warm. He continued, "I used to build walls to keep the world out, but you walked through every one of them quietly, like light through glass. The air between them felt sacred. The walls around them seemed to hold the moment still." Maya stepped closer to one of the repaired bowls, tracing a gold vein that spiraled across its surface. "You know," she said softly, "people think the gold is what makes it beautiful, but it's the break that makes it necessary." He nodded slowly. "Maybe that's true for us too." She tilted her head. "Us?" He smiled, a little uncertain. "For this family. For me." Maya folded her hands in front of her. "Edward." He took a small step closer, close enough that she could see the reflection of the hall's light in his eyes. "I'm not good with speeches," he said, his voice quiet but sure. "I don't want to promise perfection. I just want to promise presence." From his pocket, he took out a small, simple box. No velvet, no gold trim, just wood, worn and human. He opened it to reveal a modest ring, silver, with a thin line of gold running through the middle, like the bowls around them. "I built walls to keep grief out," he said softly, his tone barely above a whisper. "You walked through them with grace. You showed me that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means carrying light forward." He paused, breathing in deeply. "Maya Williams, will you stay, not as the one who helps us heal, but as the one who helps us live?" She didn't answer at first. Instead, she looked down at the ring, the way it caught the light. Two metals fused together, unbroken, inseparable. For a moment, her past came rushing back. Every home she'd worked in, every door that had closed behind her, every time she'd been told her care was temporary. But this time, the door in front of her wasn't closing. It was staying open. Tears filled her eyes, though she smiled through them. "We're already a family," she said softly. "This is just a home catching up." Edward exhaled, laughter and relief woven together. "So that's a yes?" "It's a yes to what's already true," she replied. He slipped the ring gently onto her finger. It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. The gold line felt warm against her skin, like a heartbeat made visible. At that moment, faint footsteps echoed from the hallway. The twins peeked around the doorway, still in their pajamas. Eli rubbed his eyes. "Daddy, why are you still awake?" Edward chuckled. "I could ask you the same thing." Noah blinked sleepily. "We wanted water, but—" He paused, pointing to the ring. "Is that a new family thing?" Maya laughed softly, kneeling to their height. "Something like that." Eli grinned. "Does that mean you're staying forever?" She smiled. "That's the plan." Edward lifted both boys into his arms, one on each side. "Well then, I guess forever starts tonight." They sat together on the floor of the hall, the four of them surrounded by the gentle shimmer of gold and the quiet hum of the air conditioning. No music, no applause. Just the sound of hearts slowing down into peace. Belle appeared in the doorway, drawn by the light. She took in the scene, her father holding the twins. Maya's quiet smile, the glowing gold around them, and understood without needing words. She whispered, "Mom would have liked this." Edward looked up. "She would have loved it," Maya nodded. "Then let's make sure she's always part of it." Belle crossed the room and sat beside them, resting her head on her father's shoulder. For the first time, the family felt whole in a way that didn't erase the past, but included it. After everyone had gone to bed, Maya lingered alone again. She stood in front of the mural one last time. The gold cracks glimmered faintly under the nightlights, and for a second, she thought she saw her reflection beside Lillian's. Two women connected not by rivalry or replacement, but by continuity. She whispered softly, "Thank you for trusting me with them." Outside, the lake shimmered beneath the moonlight. The wind was gentle, cool, and kind. She stepped out onto the porch and looked up. The stars were bright enough to see their faint reflections ripple in the water. Countless points of light, mended into constellations. Edward joined her there, barefoot, holding 2 cups of tea. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Not yet," she said. "I don't want to miss this feeling." He smiled. "What feeling?" "That everything broken finally learned how to stay." They stood in silence, sipping their tea, the night wrapping around them like a soft promise. Inside, the gold in the hall still glowed faintly, as if even light had chosen to rest there. The morning of the state parenting conference arrived with a gentle fog. It wrapped the streets in silver, softening even the traffic into something distant and manageable. Maya watched from the car window as they drove toward the university auditorium, a grand building of glass and brick, already crowded with people. Banners hung across the entrance reading, "Annual Conference on Family and Early Development." Beside her, Edward sat quietly, a folder on his lap. His tie was slightly crooked, his hands fidgeted with a pen. "You nervous?" she asked softly. He smiled, terrified. She laughed. "Good. It means you care." From the back seat, Belle leaned forward, adjusting her notes. "We don't need to impress anyone," she said. "We just need to remind them why we started." Maya nodded. "Exactly. We're not presenting research. We're sharing a story." Inside, the auditorium buzzed with polite chatter. Teachers, therapists, policymakers, students. Rows of name tags gleamed under stage lights. At the registration table, a volunteer greeted them warmly. "Ah, the Hawthorne Williams Center," she said. "Everyone's been talking about you." Edward raised an eyebrow. "All good things, I hope." The volunteer smiled, the kind that gives people hope. They followed her to the waiting area backstage. Through the curtain, they could see the audience settling. Belle stood by the podium, rehearsing under her breath. Maya placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't memorize," she said. "Just tell the truth like you would at dinner." Belle exhaled, nodded. Right. Dinner with 500 strangers. The event opened with a few formal speakers, psychologists quoting studies, policy analysts discussing funding. Then came the introduction. Next, we have a special presentation from the founders of the Hawthorne Williams Center, a project that combines clinical knowledge with lived experience. Applause rippled through the hall as the lights dimmed slightly. Maya walked to the podium first, wearing her simple navy dress and her quiet confidence. Edward followed, carrying only a single page of notes. Belle stood between them, clutching her speech but smiling. "Good morning," Maya began, her voice, calm and measured, carried easily through the hall. When people talk about parenting, they often talk about perfection, the right schools, the right schedules, the right tone of voice. But at our center, we talk about something simpler: presence. She paused, allowing the word to rest. Presence doesn't mean doing everything right. It means showing up again and again, even when it's uncomfortable. That's where healing begins. She looked over at Edward. He stepped forward, his tone gentle but steady. "When I lost my wife, I thought my children needed strength. What they really needed was softness. And that lesson didn't come from a book. It came from the woman standing beside me." A quiet murmur passed through the crowd. Maya smiled. "He's still learning to listen," she teased lightly. Laughter spread, soft, genuine. Then Belle took the microphone. Her voice trembled for a moment, but steadied. "My name is Belle," she said. "When Maya first came into our lives, I didn't trust her. I thought she was just another adult trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. But she didn't fix us. She stayed. And slowly, staying taught me that love doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it whispers." She glanced down at her notes, then set them aside. "So I want to say this, to any parent, caregiver, or child who's scared. Pain isn't weakness. It's proof you tried." The audience grew still, as if holding its breath. After a long pause, Maya continued. "There's a term in child development called continuity of care." She spoke softly, translating the phrase for hearts instead of textbooks. It means children thrive when the people around them stay constant, when faces don't disappear after the first storm. We've learned that adults need that too. Continuity isn't just for babies. It's for anyone who's been left behind. The hall remained silent, the kind of silence that listens deeply. She finished simply, "You can't buy presence. You build it moment by moment with patience and grace." For a heartbeat, there was only stillness. Then the applause rose, not the sharp clapping of performance, but the sustained rhythm of people moved quietly to their feet. Afterward, dozens of attendees approached them. Some wanted to donate, others to volunteer, and many just to say thank you. One older man, a retired professor, shook Maya's hand and said, "I've been studying family systems for 40 years, and you just described in 10 minutes what most of us forget. Compassion isn't data, it's discipline." She smiled softly. "Then maybe we're learning from each other." Belle was surrounded by students her age, asking questions, taking photos. Edward stood a few steps away, watching her, pride and humility blending in his expression. He turned to Maya. "You know, I thought today would be about the center, but it's really about what the center changed in us." She nodded. "That's how healing works. It never stays where it starts." Later that evening, after the conference had ended, the three of them walked outside together. The fog had lifted. The sky was clear and wide, brushed with orange light from the setting sun. They stood at the edge of the university lawn. Nearby, volunteers were packing boxes, laughter carrying across the cool air. Belle stretched her arms above her head. "I can't believe people clapped for us." Maya smiled. "They didn't clap for us. They clapped for what's possible." Edward added quietly, "And for what's true." They lingered a while longer, not wanting to leave. Belle sat on the grass, scrolling through her phone. "Look," she said. "The video's already online. 1,000 views in 1 hour." Maya laughed softly. "The world listens faster than it learns." "But it's learning," Belle said, "and so are we." A breeze stirred the leaves around them, scattering a few across the grass. One landed on Maya's shoe. She bent down, picked it up, and examined its golden veins. "Even leaves hold their scars beautifully," she murmured. Edward looked at her. "Do you ever stop seeing poetry in things?" "Only when they stop teaching me," she said. He smiled. "Then I hope you never stop learning." They walked back toward the car, their steps unhurried, their silhouettes stretched long by the fading sun. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker like distant candles. In her reflection, she could see the ring on her finger glint softly. It caught the same kind of light that filled the Hall of Resilience, imperfect, golden, real. She whispered, "You can't buy presents. You build it." And somewhere in the dark, she felt the truth answer quietly back. Spring arrived gently that year. The air carried the scent of magnolia and rain-soaked soil, and the center's garden bloomed in colors that seemed almost deliberate. White petals, soft pink blossoms, golden sunlight filtering through branches. Maya stood by the window of her office, looking out at the courtyard where new families arrived each morning. The laughter of children floated upward, mingling with the faint music playing from a volunteer's phone. The Hawthorne Williams Center had grown beyond anything she had imagined. There were new wings now, one for early learning, one for parent mentorship, another for grief support. She had just finished signing the papers to open 2 more centers in neighboring states. "Roots and wings," she murmured, reading the inscription on the plaque by the door. "That's what this place has become." Downstairs, Edward was walking through the hall, his steps slow but certain. He stopped by a row of photographs on the wall, each one showing a moment of growth. The groundbreaking, the grand opening, the first therapy session, the Hall of Resilience shining in gold. He smiled when he reached the most recent photo. Belle standing on stage at the conference, holding a microphone, speaking about courage. She was already mentoring young advocates now, dividing her time between her studies and the center. Edward ran a hand along the wall, the polished surface cool beneath his fingertips. "Lillian," he whispered, "you'd be proud." Behind him, Caroline appeared, her ever-present clipboard tucked under her arm. "Talking to the walls again?" she teased lightly. He chuckled. "Maybe they're the only ones who remember everything." "Walls never forget," she said. "They just wait for new stories." Outside, Maya was leading the twins to the garden. The boys had grown taller, more confident. Eli now wore glasses, which he hated but tolerated. Noah had started carrying a notebook everywhere, sketching birds, trees, and sometimes people. They were holding a small sapling, an oak tree, barely 3 feet tall, its roots wrapped carefully in burlap. Belle met them at the edge of the lawn, carrying a wooden plaque. "Ready?" she asked. Maya smiled. "Let's plant it together." Edward joined them moments later, sleeves rolled up, shovel in hand. "The ground's soft," he said. "Good soil." Maya knelt to untie the burlap, careful not to disturb the roots. "Easy," she whispered. "You're home now." Eli looked at the plaque. "What's it say?" Belle read it aloud. "For those who stayed." The words hung in the air for a moment, quiet and complete. They dug together, not fast but patiently, as if each movement deserved its own breath. When the hole was deep enough, Edward lowered the sapling. Maya held it steady while the twins pressed handfuls of soil around it. Belle patted the earth gently, her palm smoothing the final layer flat. Caroline appeared with a watering can. "Can't have roots without a little care," she said, smiling. Water pooled around the base of the sapling, darkening the soil until it gleamed. Maya whispered, "This tree will outlive us all." Edward nodded. "Good. Let something else do the remembering for once." As they stood back, the wind stirred, carrying the scent of earth and distant lilac. The young tree swayed slightly but didn't break. Eli looked up. "Will it be big one day?" Maya smiled. "Taller than this house?" Noah squinted at the branches. "Then we'll need to come back to climb it." "You'll always be able to," Edward said. "That's what trees are for, to hold memories." Later that afternoon, the twins ran off to play by the lake, and the adults sat on a bench near the garden. Angela Williams, Maya's mother, joined them, her cane tapping softly against the stone path. She looked at the sapling and said, "It's young, but it knows where to grow." Maya smiled. "Like me, you mean?" Angela chuckled. "Exactly like you. Strong roots, steady wings." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. The sound of the boys' laughter drifted across the water. Angela spoke again, her tone softer. "I used to think leaving was strength, but watching you, I've learned that staying takes more courage." Maya looked down, her eyes gentle. "And coming back takes even more." Her mother reached for her hand. "You've done both." Evening settled slowly over the estate. The sky turned rose and gold, the lake reflecting its colors like a mirror too full to keep still. The family gathered by the porch, sipping lemonade, watching the light change. Caroline leaned against the railing. "You know, it feels different now. This house doesn't echo anymore." Maya smiled. "That's because it's listening." Edward added, "Or maybe it's finally full enough to rest." Belle sat cross-legged on the steps, sketching the tree in her notebook. "When it grows, we'll build a swing," she said. Eli clapped his hands. "And a treehouse." Noah nodded seriously. "A library in the sky." Everyone laughed. Maya reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Belle's face. "You've grown into a storyteller," she said. Belle smiled. "Maybe I learned from watching you." As twilight deepened, headlights appeared at the end of the driveway. Edward's parents, Charles and Margaret Hawthorne, stepped out of the car. For a moment, the air grew still. Edward walked forward first, meeting them halfway. Margaret's expression was cautious but soft. "We heard about the new branches," she said. "We thought we should see for ourselves." Charles nodded, clearing his throat. "And we brought something." He opened the trunk, revealing an old photograph in a wooden frame. A picture of Edward as a child, standing beside a sapling not much taller than he was. Margaret handed it to him. "Your mother planted this the day you were born. It didn't survive the first winter. Maybe this one will." Edward smiled faintly. "It already has." He turned, motioning for them to follow. "Come inside. The children would love to meet you properly this time." Margaret hesitated, then said softly, "We'd like that." As they walked toward the porch, the golden light of evening stretched across the yard, touching every face with the same warmth. Later, when everyone had gone inside, Maya lingered in the garden. The new tree swayed gently in the night air, its young leaves catching moonlight like pieces of silver cloth. She knelt and brushed her hand across the plaque. For those who stayed. She whispered, for those who learned how. The wind rose again, carrying her words upward through the branches. It rustled the leaves like a quiet reply, an unspoken promise that the roots would hold and the wings would keep finding sky. The house was quiet again. Not the uneasy kind of quiet that once filled it with grief, but a peaceful one, the kind that hums softly after laughter has had its turn. It was the night before the family's first long break since the center opened. Tomorrow they would leave for a few days by the lake, a small cabin not far from the city. No guests, no reporters, no schedules, just rest. Maya moved through the hallway with the slow grace of someone who understood the weight of stillness. The lights were dimmed. The scent of chamomile drifted faintly through the air. From upstairs came the muffled sound of the twins giggling. She smiled. Some things never changed. When she pushed open the door to their room, she found them sitting up in bed, surrounded by a fortress of pillows and books. "Shouldn't my little knights be sleeping?" she teased. Eli grinned. "We're guarding the castle," Noah added, "from nightmares." Maya sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing the blanket. "Ah, the bravest guards of all." Eli tilted his head. "Do nightmares ever stop, Maya?" She thought for a moment. "Not completely, but they stop being scary when you remember who's in the next room." Noah nodded solemnly. "You?" She smiled. "Always." They relaxed, sinking under the covers. "Tell us a story," Eli murmured sleepily. "Something about the old house," Noah added. Maya glanced around the softly lit room. "You mean this house?" "No," Eli whispered. "The one before it was happy." She drew a slow breath. "All right," she said gently. "Once there was a house that forgot how to sleep. It echoed with footsteps and sighed with empty rooms. But one day, it met a few people who taught it a lullaby. They didn't sing perfectly, but they sang every night until the walls remembered what quiet meant. And when the house finally slept, it dreamed in gold." The boy's eyes fluttered. "That's a good story," Eli mumbled. Noah added, "The house was you, right?" Maya chuckled softly. "Maybe a little." They drifted into sleep. She sat there for a long moment, watching their breathing slow, their hands unclenched. Then she whispered, "Good night, my brave guards. You've already won." Across the hall, Belle sat by her window with her journal open. The lamp beside her cast a gentle circle of light over the page. She was writing, but her pen paused often, as if the right words needed coaxing. Edward knocked softly. "May I?" She looked up and smiled. "You're not asleep either?" He shook his head. "I was checking on the boys. Then I saw your light." He stepped inside, leaning against the wall. "What are you writing?" "A letter," she said, "to Mom." He hesitated, then sat down across from her. "Do you want me to leave you alone?" "No," she said softly. "You can stay." She read a few lines, aloud. "Dear Mom, the house isn't lonely anymore. The boys sleep through the night. Dad laughs again. And there's someone here who doesn't replace you. She reminds us how to love you better." Her voice wavered, but she smiled through it. "I think you'd like her." Edward's eyes glistened. "I already do." They sat quietly, the sound of crickets weaving through the open window. Belle closed her journal and looked out at the sky. "Do you ever think about what happens after healing? What comes next?" He thought for a long moment. "Maybe rest." maybe learning to live without waiting for the next wound. Is that hard? She asked. Sometimes, he admitted, but I think we're getting good at it. Downstairs, Maya tidied the kitchen one last time. The clock ticked softly, and the hum of the refrigerator filled the space between her thoughts. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat at the table, the same one where she had once written the center's first sketches. She thought about everything the last few years had carried: the slap, the courtroom, the headlines, the forgiveness, the gold. It was all still there, inside her, but now it was quiet. She had learned that healing doesn't erase the past. It just changes the way it sounds in your mind. Less thunder, more rain. She smiled to herself. Sometimes the greatest wealth, she whispered, is a calm night. Edward found her there. He leaned against the doorway, his sleeves rolled up, the faintest smile on his face. You always wait for the quiet to find you. She looked up. It's the only thing that doesn't rush. He walked over and poured himself a cup, too. You ever think about how far we've come? Every day, she said, and I still can't believe how close it feels. He sat across from her. You taught me that peace isn't stillness, it's attention. And you taught me that love isn't fixing, it's staying, she replied. They clinked cups lightly. Outside, the wind sighed against the windows, a familiar, contented sound. Later, as they prepared to sleep, Edward paused by the window. The moonlight spilled across the floor, silver and kind. He said quietly, "You know what I've realized?" "What's that?" she asked, pulling the curtains halfway closed. "I don't dream about the past anymore. Just the present, stretched wide enough for everyone to fit." She smiled, stepping closer. "That sounds like the kind of dream worth keeping." He nodded. "And worth waking up to." They stood together for a while, not speaking, not needing to. The quiet had texture now. Warm, breathable, alive. He whispered, "You taught me how to stay awake to what matters." She answered just as softly, "Then tomorrow, let's rest." The clock in the hall struck midnight, one slow, measured chime. The house settled deeper into its calm, every creak now a sigh of contentment. Maya walked to the Ewing twins' room one last time, peeking in. The moonlight touched their faces gently, and she thought they looked like peace itself. Downstairs, Edward turned off the last light. In the distance, the lake shimmered under the moon. The young tree in the garden swayed, its roots holding firm in the earth. The wind moved through its leaves like the slow rhythm of breathing. Inside, the house slept, not because it was tired, but because it finally felt safe to. The next morning came quietly, the kind of morning that feels like a held breath before a new chapter begins. A soft mist hung over the lake, and the first light of dawn painted the water in muted silver. Inside the house, everything was still. The ticking clock had slowed with the rhythm of rest. The air smelled faintly of coffee and lemon polish. Maya stood at the window, wrapped in a shawl, watching the world wake. The twins were still asleep, their laughter tucked safely into dreams. Belle's journal lay closed on the table, her pen resting across the last page like a promise. Edward stepped beside her, his hand finding hers without a word. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to explain. The house didn't need fixing anymore. It simply needed to breathe. Outside, the new oak tree swayed lightly in the morning breeze. Drops of dew clung to its leaves like tiny jewels, catching the pale sunlight. The plaque at its base, for those who stayed, glimmered faintly. Edward smiled at the sight. It's growing faster than I expected. Maya nodded. That's what happens when you plant something in truth. He looked at her, eyes soft. And when you water it with forgiveness. They stepped out onto the porch, the boards creaking underfoot in a familiar, friendly way. The lake stretched before them, calm and endless. For the first time, Edward didn't feel the need to fill the silence. He had learned that quiet wasn't emptiness. It was completion. Later that day, they returned to the center for a small ceremony. The board had insisted on honoring Maya and Edward for their work, though Maya had resisted the idea at first. "I don't need applause," she'd said. "The work speaks for itself." Caroline had laughed. "Then let it speak a little louder for once." The event was modest, just a gathering of families, staff, and friends. Children played in the courtyard. Belle managed the microphone with practiced confidence. Dr. Samuel Reed stood at the podium, his voice warm. "When I first met the Hawthorne family," he said, "they were surviving. Today they are living and teaching others how to live with grace. The Hawthorne Williams Center has become a sanctuary for thousands, and it began not with theory, but with patience." He paused, smiling toward Maya. "What you have built here is more than a building. It is a rhythm of staying." When it was Maya's turn to speak, she walked to the microphone with that familiar composure, calm, steady, humble. Her eyes swept the crowd, parents holding children, teenagers volunteering, a few elderly couples sitting hand in hand. All of them in some way had been touched by the idea that staying could be enough. She began simply. "Years ago, I came to a house where grief had built walls so thick even light had trouble getting in. I was just a caregiver then, trying to keep 2 children safe. But along the way, I learned something no training could teach. That care isn't a profession. It's a promise." The audience listened in stillness. "I used to think love meant never leaving," she continued. "Now I know it also means returning, again and again, until peace remembers your name." Her voice softened. "This center is not mine. It belongs to everyone who's ever decided to keep showing up, even when it was easier to walk away." The applause that followed was quiet at first, then rose like a tide, full of gratitude, not noise. Edward joined her on stage, whispering, "You'll never get used to that, will you?" She smiled. "I hope not." As the event ended, Belle handed out small golden pins shaped like open hands, each one engraved with a single word: stay. Maya pinned hers to her dress. "A reminder," she said, "that even when life pulls us apart, we can still choose to remain connected." Caroline teased, "Can I get one that says rest instead?" Maya laughed. "That's what staying turns into eventually." That evening, when everyone had gone home, the family stayed behind to lock up the center. The Hall of Resilience was empty, but not silent. The golden cracks in the pottery caught the fading sunlight, glowing like slow embers. Eli pressed his palms against the cool glass of one display. "Will the gold ever fade?" Maya crouched beside him. "Maybe. But even if it does, the cracks will still remember where the light used to be." Noah asked, "Is that bad?" She shook her head. "Not at all. That's how we know we were alive." Edward placed a hand on her shoulder. "You sound like you're saying goodbye." Maya looked up, smiling. "Not goodbye, just good night." They turned off the lights together. At home, the twins fell asleep quickly, tired from the long day. Belle lingered downstairs, scrolling through the photos from the event. Images of smiling faces, gold reflections, and hands held. Maya joined her. "You've captured everything," she said softly. Belle smiled. I didn't capture it. It captured us. She showed Maya one last photo, the family standing beneath the oak tree. The branches reached upward, already taller than the year before. In the corner of the frame, a small beam of sunlight made the ring on Maya's hand glint like fire. Maya touched the screen gently. That's the light we work for. Later, when the house was dark again, the narrator's voice, that soft, unseen presence, returned. The one that had watched everything from the beginning. In the end, the house that once echoed with cries became a song of staying. Dignity was never charity here. It was recognition. And the cracks didn't disappear. They glittered. The soundscape softened, a low hum of wind, the faint call of a nightbird, the steady breath of peace. Some stories end loudly, with triumph or tears. This one ends quietly, the way healing always does, not as a finish line, but as a homecoming. For every heart that's still learning how to stay, this is your reminder. You already are. I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. If this story gave you something to think about, subscribe and share it with someone who might need it. Until next time, rest well and stay. The music faded, soft piano and the faint rustle of leaves, then silence, full and tender, like the pause after a final heartbeat.